Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 joint meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning and Transportation Commissions. This meeting is being held electronically to protect public health and safety due to the COVID-19 virus and to comply with orders issued by the governor, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and/or the Washtenaw County Health Department. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues because they still continue to occur. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 877-853-5247 or any of the other published numbers and enter meeting ID 990-9896 8122. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at a2gov.org/watchctn. If you go there, you would select the government channel. Item number 2A of this joint meeting is the roll call of the Planning Commission.
You're all so small. Commissioner Mills.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Milstein.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Gibb-Randall.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Abrams.
Here, also from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Dish.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee.
Also here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Clark.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Full house for Planning Commission.
All right, 2B is the roll call for the Transportation Commission.
All right. We have received regrets from Commissioner Balderrama and Commissioner Dolan. I will now call roll for the remaining commissioners. Commissioner Boland.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Briggs.
Present in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Felt.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hadimaki.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hull.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Kleiman.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Parsons. Okay, absent. Commission.
Here, but not promoted yet. Sorry.
Oh, okay. We'll work on that. Commissioner Smith.
Both Commissioners Parsons and Smith have just been promoted. So
Thank you.
Commissioner
And
Smith here in Dexter, Michigan.
thank you. Commissioner Summers. Absent. We'll circle back to Commissioner Parsons.
Here in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Thank you. Commissioner Hess.
Here in Northville, Michigan.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
Here in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Commissioner Margolis. Lieutenant Mike Sherba.
Here in Fenton, Michigan.
Commissioner Stupka. We have a quorum.
Very good. Then let's move on to item number 3, which is introductions. And I just wanted to note that as a joint meeting, there's going to be some actions occurring independently by each commission and then also collaboratively throughout the course of the agenda. For the primary agenda item, consideration of the Ann Arbor Moving Together Toward Vision Zero, the City of Ann Arbor Comprehensive Transportation Plan, both commissions will collaboratively hold a public hearing on this, deliberate, and then consider independent actions. So one public hearing, joint deliberation, and then we'll vote separately. I also want to note, particularly for planning commissioners, we're used to taking most of the night, but the Transportation Commission typically sets a time limit for each item so that they end their meetings closer to 9. That's going to be tough with all of us, but I'm going to try my best to move our deliberation and discussion along. So Just to let you know, we're going to try to take a page out of the Transportation Commission's book. Also, Transportation Commission, bear with me if I mispronounce your last names and just correct me, please. Item number 4 is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda on behalf of both commissions? Moved by Commissioner Dish, seconded by Commissioner Hall. Mr. Leonard, yes.
Just one quick clarification. There's no action as part of item 8C, work plan overviews. The language there refers to Planning Commission and Transportation Commission actions. That is just an update. So I just wanted to clarify for the commissions and the public, no action on 8C this evening.
Very good. Is there any other discussion of the motion? And Mr. Leonard, it's fine that we mix the commissions in moving and seconding, yeah? Excellent. I see no hands for discussion, and if I'm missing you, you can use the little raise hand button, but otherwise I'll just go with like visual hands. All right, this one we'll just do a voice vote or a raise your hand vote. So all those in favor of the motion to approve the agenda, please say yes or raise your hands. I see most hands. Any opposed, please verbalize that so we can hear you. All right, the motion carries. Item number 5 is communication, and we've received communication, including an email later in the day with additional communications that were received prior to the meeting. So I trust that everyone's had an opportunity to read that. Item number 6 is public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about an issue that's not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. We will have one public hearing this evening, and that is for the City of Ann Arbor Comprehensive Transportation Plan. To comment on any other matter, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 990-9896-8122. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand, calling on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. You digitally raise your hand by pressing *9 on your telephone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any background sound, including your television, so that we can hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And on your telephone, you may need to press *6 to unmute when it's your turn. But right now, if you'd like to digitally raise your hand, you press *9 to let us know you'd like to provide a public comment.
Caller with the phone number ending with 534. Caller with the phone number ending with 534. You can unmute your phone using *6 and address the Joint Planning and Transportation Commission for 3 minutes.
Good evening. This is Tom Stolberg calling from Lowertown in Ann Arbor. I'm happy to see that you have on your agenda the reconsideration of the amendments to modify the home occupation regulations. Thank you for listening to the many callers and people who've written you on that item. I want to refer back to something you've been discussing recently a lot, which was the TC1, the transit corridor zoning, and that dovetails into the discussion tonight, which should be quite interesting to listen to. Something I've said a lot, I know you maybe heard it a few times from me, is that the process is important, especially because zoning is law. Something that I noted in your discussions there, as you know, I've for a long time been in favor of transit corridor zoning. I would not have envisioned it the exact same way that you have, but I'm glad you're moving forward with something. And the discussions have been illuminating. Both Brett and Alexis were trying to help steer you in the connection between the master plan and the zoning ordinance and tie things more directly and looking at an intent statement. And I know some of the other people from the Transportation Committee might not be up on what happened at this most recent Planning Commission meeting, but in short, I think that was an important connection that you might think about again the next time or going forward, that zoning needs to be legally defensible. And so that's really what they were headed for, and I could see why they were wanting to do it that way. And that's one of the reasons why I keep talking about the process. If we follow the proper process, the resulting plans and ordinances are more defensible if challenged. And if we don't follow those, the opposite is true. We expose ourselves to legal challenges and even invite them. And we worsen our odds of successfully defending those challenges. So, I think the advice that you were given there was quite wise in terms of making that legally defensible. So hopefully you'll think about that going forward with this and other issues. You did mention campus business zoning again, so of course I'm going to have to say something about that because that was an issue that is problematic, and it still hangs out there as problematic. And relating to transportation in particular, Lower Town was master planned for a mixed-use urban village. We have an all residential development, 99 point whatever percent. And we have a lot of condos, apartments, and houses all around there where people could have gotten out of their cars if we had something to go to. So not just the new 1,000 residents, but the existing residents really could have driven a lot less vehicle miles and perhaps owned a lot less vehicles even if we had that type of mixed-use development. So going forward, I hope we can find ways to
That's 3 minutes.
follow the mass. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 945. Caller with the phone number ending with 945. You have 3 minutes to address the commissions.
Scott Cole from the Jackson Huron Neighborhood Association. I was a late arrival today with some information regarding our neighborhood association. Hopefully that made it to your packets. Just as an introduction, we've been a neighborhood association since 1998. We border Jackson at Maple all the way to Huron and Maine. We were early to the table with traffic calming under Mayor Sheldon, and it was actually John Ifja that got us to a 3-lane conversion from Maple to Ravenna.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure if this is specifically about the master plan, we have a separate public hearing for that. So there'll be an opportunity right after this one.
Okay, I'm sorry. So this is for the Vision Zero plan?
Yeah, we will have a dedicated public hearing for that and take all the comments about that together. So sorry for the confusion. And just for others on the line too. So you'll be able to raise your hand again once we get to that. For those on the line, if you have an item that you'd wish to address the Transportation and Planning Commission about that's not for the public hearing, so pretty much anything other than the Transportation Master Plan, you can press *9 now to indicate that you'd like to speak, and it'll digitally raise your hand.
Caller with the phone number ending with 604. Caller with the phone number ending with 604. You can press *6 to unmute your phone and address the commissions for up to 3 minutes. Caller with the phone number ending with 604. You can press *6 to unmute your phone and address the Planning and Transportation Commissions.
We'll come back to them.
Caller with the phone number ending with 936. Caller with the phone number ending with 936. You can unmute your phone and address the commissions. Go ahead.
Hello.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. So I called into Arbor City Council last night. That was the worst meeting I've ever seen in my over a year of watching. This is Violin Monster. It was like 1 o'clock or something by the time public comment came for me to speak, and I don't, and even now too, it's hard to get my thoughts to come out. There's a lot of work that y'all public officials have to do with the community right now. These wounds are deep. January 4th, I was intimidated by Councilmember Hayner and Lem Lally in my public comments, to the point where the following day, based on the immediate backlash and several council members talking specifically about my comments, highlighting it, and then an MLive article coming out the next day with my name on it. It's uncomfortable. I couldn't even read it because of the paywall. It was kind of funny. So yeah, it's been hard for me to call in for a while because it doesn't feel comfortable calling this number and talking to my government right now. I'm calling on the community to recall Councilmember Hayner. We've been dealing with racism, misogyny, xenophobia, failure to condemn white supremacy, anti-LGBTQ sentiments, repeated attacks on our First Amendment and the free press. It's time for the community to remove Councilmember Hayner and
30 more seconds.
Allow us to heal, send a clear message to the other council members that they need to change their game plan. And we need to stand up and do this together. We have to have a reckoning of not being there for other communities.
That's 3
when
minutes.
they needed us.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for your call.
Caller with the phone number ending with 936. Caller with the phone number ending with 936. You can unmute your phone using *6 and address the commissions. Caller with the phone number ending with 936.
We just lost you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 134. Caller with the phone number ending with 134. You can unmute your phone using *6 and address the Planning and Transportation Commissions. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Leonard, Chair Mills, and Chair Kleinman. This is Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. I'm just calling to support the Healthy Streets deployment for 2021. I only wish the lane closures were more extensive, especially North Division and the Broadway Bridge, which were the parts I biked most last year. But I'm looking forward to safer biking in the other areas covered. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If anyone else wishes to provide a public comment on an issue that we don't have a public hearing on, which is for the Transportation Master Plan, please press *9 on your phone now. Seeing none, I will move on to item number 7A, which is the Moving Together Towards Vision Zero City of Ann Arbor Comprehensive Transportation Plan. Adoption of the plan as part of the city master plan. So just so that people have a sense of where we're heading, we're going to have staff presentation. Then we'll open the public hearing for an opportunity for public comment. Once that's done, we'll read the motions, Transportation Commission, then Planning Commission, then we'll have our joint discussion, and then we'll vote on it separately. So that's kind of the order of operations of what's to come. So staff, feel free to take it away whenever you are ready.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Eli Cooper. I'm the city's transportation program manager, and I'm going to do a very brief introduction, recognizing that there's a limited amount of time. I just want to note and thank the community. I've been with the city for, it'll be 16 years next week, and this will be the fourth transportation plan adoption that I will have participated in. I recall back to 2005, 2006, when I started, we began with a city's first comprehensive non-motorized transportation plan. And we've made a significant difference over the past decade and a half. And I really just wanted to set that stage to highlight, as I'm about to introduce Stacy Meekins from Sam Schwartz, our consulting team, to introduce the Moving Together Forward Towards Vision Zero, which will be our first Vision Zero plan. So whereas in the beginning part of the 21st century, we began to look at active transportation, we're now changing our focus. We're still absolutely focused on active transportation, but the issue of safety is coming to the fore. And so on behalf of staff and the team, I look forward to your questions and comments after, but I'll now turn it to Stacy, who will walk you through our formal presentation about the work that we're bringing forward for your consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Eli. Good evening, commissioners. It's good to see you all again. So what I have for you tonight is a pretty brief presentation. As you've all seen the plan before, and we presented it back in December and the fall. But just for the public's sake, I'm going to go through a high-level overview of the process we went through, talk about the document itself and how it's structured, some key plan updates that we have conducted since the last draft, and some additional recommended updates that we have since a few more conversations in recent days, and then anticipated next steps. So the process, kind of in a nutshell, broke down into 3 phases. The first was our discovery phase, in which we were really trying to learn about the opportunities and challenges around transportation in Ann Arbor. And we were also trying to identify a set of values and goals of the community that the community holds dear to guide decision-making and the strategies that would really embody the plan. So the next phase was our ideation phase, and that's where we are compiling all of the ideas for projects, policies, and programs that will help the city achieve the goals and values that were identified in the discovery phase. So in that phase, we are looking to other communities to see what worked there. And we did a lot of outreach and discussion with stakeholders and the public to see what the community wanted to see happen in Ann Arbor. And then finally, the action planning phase, where we refined that long list of projects and programs and policies into a set of strategies that are organized by priority and by timeline, and then assigned estimated costs and assigned resources so that we can ensure that the plan is implementable. So through all those phases, we did a lot of public engagement. We had really great input from the community throughout this process. And that really, really is a testament to how the plan is today. It was a really community-driven process, more so than many that I've been involved in. In that discovery phase, again, we were looking to understand how people get around today. What is transportation like in Ann Arbor? So we kicked it off with a transportation behaviors survey and got immediately over 1,500 responses within a couple days, and all told over 1,800 responses to that survey. One of the things that we heard early on was that the community really wanted to see a network for bicycling that was comfortable for all ages and abilities. And so we wanted to set the baseline of, how comfortable is it today? So we followed up that original survey with an online survey asking people about their level of comfort bicycling, and had over 1,000 responses to that one as well. We did a traditional open house and some pop-up meetings that were around the same time, focused on the same questions that we were asking the public, and a series of focus groups so that we could have a small group discussion more in depth around certain issues. Then next, in the ideation phase, again, we had another traditional open house. We had an online survey that focused on corridors that we had identified as being safety concerns based on the crash data analysis that we did. I should mention in the discovery phase, and what we're doing in the background is a lot of data crunching and understanding both how people are getting around, but also what is the safety environment for transportation in Ann Arbor. And then back to the ideation phase, again, responding to some of what we heard in the discovery phase, we set out a pedestrian crossing specific survey and had almost 1,000 responses to that one as well. And then following up on the bicycle level of comfort survey, we developed a draft all ages and abilities network, put that online and asked for your feedback and got over 3,500 comments on that. In the action planning phase, we held a virtual public open house and then had the traditional open comment and review period. So an overview of what the document looks like. I'm sure that you all have had a chance to see it. It lays out in these 7 main sections. The first being the introduction, where we are just setting the stage for what the plan is and where it came from. Section 2 covers the mobility in Ann Arbor as it is today. And Section 3 reports back on the mobility values and goals that we heard from the community. Section 4 is really the bulk of the plan, and that addresses all of the strategies that the community values and would like to see, and that we brought to the table to address the safety concerns and the mobility values and goals set forth by the community. Section 5 then takes some of those strategies and develops some conceptual designs for what that could look like on the streets of Ann Arbor. And then Section 6 is how do we make it all happen? So that's where we applied cost estimates, timelines, and projected out resources so that the city can help, so the city can plan and assign their resources appropriately. And then finally, we added a glossary and an acronym guide so that people can more easily read through the plan and understand any terms that they're not familiar with. So just for those of you who may not be as familiar with the plan, I wanted to hit just a couple items at a high level. So the mobility values that we found really crowdsourced from the community. As Eli already mentioned, this is a Vision Zero plan. That was kind of the directive that we were given coming into this, and the community really supported it. Safety was by far the highest rated mobility value among the public and stakeholders. But it wasn't the only thing that was important. So other values that rose to the top included mobility, accessibility for all, healthy people and sustainable places, and regional connectivity. The overarching goals that drove the plan were that the city wants to move towards 0 deaths and 0 emissions. So these were some pretty clear directives that we got from the community. As I mentioned, the bulk of the plan is Section 4, where we outline all of the strategies that will help the city achieve those goals. So in total, there are 76 strategies that are all included in a matrix at the back of that section. And then the majority of that section includes 22 key strategies that go into a little bit more detail about what the current state is with respect to that strategy and what the actual recommendation is. But all strategies speak to how that strategy relates to the values. A lot of the strategies cross-cut multiple values, so you'll see more than one value listed for each strategy. Each strategy also outlines the discipline that getting to 0 fatalities and serious injuries takes more than just infrastructure. It takes infrastructure changes, it takes education, encouragement, enforcement, addressing equity, and evaluation. So with each strategy, we denote how what is involved in that strategy and how all of those are being covered. We also cover the cross-agency and cross-departmental collaboration by assigning the key departments or agencies that are important to implementing that strategy, and then laying that out in a time-based action strategy in short, medium, and long term. And finally, accountability. Each strategy includes targets so that the community can hold itself accountable. Key plan updates since the last draft include revisions to the bike map. Some of those revisions were just to make sure that we were being consistent and the map is clean. But in addition to that, we also did add Newport Road as a recommended bike route, and we specifically refined routes that were depicting the border-to-border trail connections that might have been missing or just misclassified in some cases. We made some refinements to the transit corridors map based on feedback from AAATA, and we made a refinement to the 20-minute neighborhood map for park access. Both of those refinements were really more graphical. They didn't have any substantive change to the plan and the strategy recommended. We also added some language in a couple cases for clarity. In strategy 6 on the bike routes, we added a discussion of the importance of a campus-to-campus connection and of the planning level nature of the corridors, meaning that things may change as the staff goes to implement, and maybe some of the corridors that are identified might need to be tweaked or revised. And then in strategy 10, which is transit service, we added language about transit service demand also being part of what will dictate the frequency of existing fixed route service. There were some components that were added. The glossary and partner acronym reference that I mentioned earlier is new, and an acknowledgements page had not made it into the last draft either. And we added 3 appendices. Appendix B lists the projects that are present throughout the plan, but this is just added for ease of reference. We also added relevant maps from the 2013 non-motorized transportation plan. We added an appendix to summarize all the public engagement done throughout the process. And finally, an appendix that details the methodologies of our analyses. I mentioned at the beginning that there are some additional updates recommended by staff, and I'll just go through those quickly right now. The following language will be added to the document, making a stronger connection between distracted driving and reckless driving in strategy 2, which is addressing dangerous behaviors. we would like to add an additional action item addressing roadway reconfigurations on MDOT roadways associated with that tool, which is also in strategy 2. We would like to modify language in strategy 6, which is bike routes, to clarify that the routes need to be continuous in order to create a full all ages and abilities network. And also in strategy 6, denoting the importance of off-street paths and the border-to-border trail specifically. We also want to acknowledge that Appendix B project lists will be modified to include the list of the focus corridors and intersections. Anticipated next steps would be a council work session, and we always want to be looking forward to implementation. And so some of the very first implementation steps would be to designate a Vision Zero Citizen Advisory Board and start to establish a list of projects that will address the plan priorities. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Was there any other staff? Mr. Leonard.
Just briefly, just as an aside, Stacy, if you can, you might just want to try to adjust your mic like an inch or two away from you. It's just sort of noisy. So
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. I provided a summary in our staff report, largely obviously summarizing what you just saw. Generally, I think that the document is well crafted, as we've expressed to you before. I think it is concise. I think it's actually a great and accessible comprehensive transportation plan for the city for both policymakers and the public. So in short, I recommend your approval of it and recommendation to the city council, and look forward to your discussion.
Very good. That's all the staff reports then before public hearing. Okay. Let me then read the information for the public hearing. So this is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about adoption of the Ann Arbor Moving Together Towards Vision Zero City of Ann Arbor Comprehensive Transportation Plan. Public comment can be made by calling 877-853-5247 and then entering meeting ID 990-9896-8122. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one, calling on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. In order to electronically raise your hand after dialing into the meeting, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement once the host is allowing you to speak. Please move to a quiet area and mute any background sound so that we can hear you clearly. Please also state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And I do see that we have some folks with their hands up.
Caller with the phone number ending with 945. Caller with the phone number ending with 945. You can unmute your phone using *6 and address the commissions. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, my name is Scott Cole. I live at 1319 West Huron Street. Unfortunately, I called in earlier. I'm sorry for that, but I'll just recap quickly. Part of the Jackson Huron Neighborhood Association, we start at Maple and Jackson by Vets Park, if you can picture that, Jackson and Maple by Veterans Park. And we go all the way to Huron and Main Street. We were formed in 1998. We were early to the table with traffic calming under Mayor Sheldon. John Heapja then became mayor, and we were able to work with MDOT and have Jackson Avenue from Maple and Jackson at Vets Park to Ravenna, where Dexter and Jackson merged to Huron. At Ravenna, they were able to convert that to 3 lanes. That was in 2007. Since then, we've had a couple of city plans, 2009, and then we had another non-motorized plan in 2007, and then an update in 2013. And somehow the Jackson-Huron corridor which does this huge amount of volume every day. Maybe it's less now during COVID, but does this huge amount of volume, is a main thoroughfare for the city of Ann Arbor. It still is not even mentioned in this new Vision Zero plan. So unfortunately, our data didn't get submitted into the packet for tonight's meeting, so I had to do a late insertion like at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Hopefully it made it. We're putting together a Vision Zero plan for the Jackson-Huron corridor. But I quickly want to say before my time ends, I heard the young lady, and hey, kudos to this Vision Zero plan. This is great. Just make sure you look at all the neighborhoods, and we're a big neighborhood here. We're a corridor. We talked about goals and values, and so I wonder what the goals and values would be for Huron Street. But I also heard them say, and this is what we've heard for 23 years, it's the crash data analysis and the safety analysis. And whether it's true or not, I guess people aren't dying on the Jackson-Huron Street.
30 more seconds.
Yet, at least they're not dying yet. So we want to just bring a human element to the Jackson-Huron Neighborhood Association. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 741. Caller with the phone number ending with 741. You can unmute your phone using *6 and address the commissions.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
My name is Larry Deck. I live at 3050 Lorraine Street in Ann Arbor. I'm on the board of the Washington Bicycling and Walking Coalition, but I'm speaking tonight as an individual because we haven't had time to react to the changes that went into the April draft. I'd like to say first, we're very pleased with the overall planning process here. I think staff and consultants have done a great job on the project and appreciate their involvement of the community and their responsiveness to suggestions. WBWC's comments in early March suggested 7 main modifications, fairly minor modifications of the plan. I think 4 of those were handled well into the April draft, so we're pleased with the way that happened. There were 3 remaining ones which I didn't think were adequately addressed, but from Stacy's comments earlier today, they may be being addressed and taken care of. They relate to distracted driving, and make sure that we recognize the importance of that as an issue in relation to device use. Bicycle facility continuity, which is an important thing that we had asked to be included. It wasn't in the April draft, but it sounds like that may be being added now, which we appreciate. And the border trail wasn't talked about much in the earlier draft. There were some good additions that went into the April draft to show how some of the gaps in the system in Ann Arbor could be filled. And we appreciate that. And the thing that was remaining for us on that was some recognition of the importance of the B2B trail and the importance to the continuity of the integrity of the whole non-motorized system in Ann Arbor and the county. And it sounds like the city may be addressing that too. If we'll see how the final changes come, but if Stacy's comments are an indication, it sounds like, again, the staff is being very responsive to our concerns. So appreciate that. In the material I sent, I think you have an email that I sent and the 2 attached documents, the earlier comments that WBWC had on the plan, and then a 1-page document on these 3 remaining things that I thought ought to be addressed. And it sounds like those may be being addressed. You can check with the staff to make sure that they are. I was going to ask that you see that those are addressed and just make sure that they are. And if they are, we appreciate that. And we appreciate the overall process. So thank you very much for the opportunity to have input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 955. Caller with the phone number ending with 955. Go ahead.
Greetings, commissioners. This is Kirk Westfall, 3505 Charter Place. Just want to echo Mr. Deck's compliments for a process well run. A couple of things I'd like to highlight. I sent in some feedback back in November, and from what I understand, it was not entirely processed until today. So I'm hoping you will get that at some point in your packet. But the major thing that alarms me about some of the words in the plan have to do with lane configurations. Yeah, I'm really concerned. I've been concerned about this for over a decade. I'm really concerned given we're coming out of the pandemic and more people will be walking and driving, and from all measures I can see, driving has gotten worse in the past year. Even though there's been fewer cars, people are driving more recklessly. And I feel like pedestrian crossings are going to continue to plague us with tragedy and injuries. So I was concerned that the plan, as it's worded now, in the last draft I saw anyway, it said for street reconfigurations, it says implement roadway reconfigurations where opportunities have previously been identified, which I think there's only a couple left that are identified in previous plans. And then it says evaluate opportunities for lane reductions in corridor reconstruction projects. And those reconstruction projects, as we know, are pretty far and few between and take a very long time. I would love for this plan not to eliminate the possibility of effectively closing lanes or converting them to bike lanes or whatever, where they're not needed. For example, there's Huron Parkway near Huron High School. Students have been seriously injured, and unfortunately, there was a death there, at least since I've lived here. By all accounts, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but looking at the traffic counts, that does not need to be a 4-lane road, and it's outside of school and it's the site of previous injuries. So I think there should be flexibility in the plan for the commissions and council to take action to do lane reductions. The other area of concern is roundabouts. I feel like being a Vision Zero plan, it should also be focusing on reducing injuries to drivers, which roundabouts do extremely well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 134. Caller with the phone number ending with 134. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Leonard. Chair Mills, Chair Kleinman, this is Ken Garber again, 28 Haverhill Court. I appreciate the opportunity to bug Transportation Commission with my comments instead of just bugging Planning Commission, which is pretty used to my harangues. I'm grateful for all the hard work by so many people on the transportation plan, which I've only skimmed. I apologize. I haven't really been part of the process. But I'd like to comment about greenhouse gas emissions. I'm happy that we're setting the goal of transitioning to a carbon neutral transportation system by 2030. But I don't see anything in the plan, including better transit, bike safety measures, new shared mobility options, and even road user pricing that gets us anywhere close. And right now we're failing. The city's transportation emissions have not gone down from 2015 levels. They've been at about 360,000 metric tons CO2 a year since then, according to the most recent greenhouse gas inventory. And that's not because of more commuters. Local transportation emissions have also held steady for the last 5 years. Transportation accounts for 30% of our community emissions, according to the inventory. I don't see EVs helping much. In my view, they'll perpetuate the vast resource extraction, energy consumption, and land use costs of personal transportation. Our global carbon budgets for staying at 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius heating have dwindled to the point that we as a society can't afford the embedded emission costs of transitioning our entire internal combustion vehicle fleet to electric, not to mention the new generation capacity required to charge all those car batteries. Instead, the main focus has to be on reducing energy use. We need walking, biking, and transit to become our default mobility options. But just the opposite seems to be happening. The pandemic lull did not reset our thinking on this. Those of us who bike Ann Arbor streets know that personal vehicles, seemingly dominated by SUVs and trucks, are back in force. Or maybe it's just because people are driving more recklessly, as Mr. Westfall suggested. Anyway, it's my hope that the transportation plan before you tonight will somehow begin to change our personal mobility culture, and I support the
30 more
plan.
seconds.
But the last year has made me deeply pessimistic. I think we're going to need more radical measures than the ones in this plan. For a start, turn most of downtown into a vehicle-free pedestrian zone. But I'm not naive, because the whole organization of modern society, including our city, is built around the auto. We probably can only make a real difference on the fringes. I don't see people giving up unlimited personal mobility. It's too deeply embedded in our culture.
It's 3 minutes, Speaker.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If there's anyone else that wishes to address the Transportation and Planning Commissions during this public hearing, please press *9 on your phone to raise your hand.
Caller with the phone number ending with 604. Caller with the phone number ending with 604. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. This is Eric Lipson, 1318 Rosewood. I'd like to say thanks to all of the people who are involved in creating this plan, including the commissioners, who I know have given a lot of their time. I'd like to say this plan is really a beautiful document. Not only it's substantive, but it is accessible, as Mr. Leonard said. It's very, very impressive, and I think everybody should be happy with it. I had a couple of comments. One is that as safety especially is considered the primary value, I was wondering why lighting was not emphasized more. I would have put a whole chapter in, I think. I'll be very, very specific. The bicycle corridor, or the corridor between State Street and Stadium on Packard. That's Packard between the Devil's Triangle and Stadium is woefully poorly lit. On the CIP every year, it's there, and then it somehow gets deferred. And I would submit that this is a primary pedestrian corridor 24/7 because it's in a predominantly student area. You're not going to stop students from riding the wrong way, wearing all black and no reflectors on their bike in the bike lane. But if you at least illuminate that corridor better, you reduce the chance of someone dying or serious accident, or in fact, lowering the crime rate potentially. Although there is some question as to whether that is, there's a correlation there. Anyway, and the other thing I'd like to comment on is the healthy streets. I'm very, I tried to call in earlier and didn't get on, but I'm very, very enthusiastic about and endorse the revisions made to the Healthy Streets program. I live on Rosewood, closing Rosewood at the industrial areas and the parallel street Jewett and the Harps, which are being used today as through streets for all of the contractors and everybody who's cutting through between Packard and South Industrial. This will turn this neighborhood into a garden area. It'll really change and raise the quality of life in that whole neighborhood, which, as I say, right now is a pretty busy through area with at least 2,000 cars a day on each of those streets at last count. So I think that's absolutely that one, and the other corridor changes too.
30 more seconds.
Will be very beneficial. I know there was problems on Packard at Platt because people were bailing out into the neighborhoods there, and I think you've corrected these. It might need some tweaking. I think you do need some barriers and markers where the lanes begin at Packard and Eisenhower to because drivers don't notice those bike lanes, so you do need some extra demarcations. There was some discussion at council about that last night. But anyway, great job on this excellent document, great piece of work, and I endorse it and thank you for doing it.
Thank you very much.
Caller with the phone number ending with 340. Caller with the phone number ending with 340. You can unmute your phone using *6 and address the commissions. Caller with the phone number ending with 340. Please unmute your phone using *6 and you can address the commissions for 3 minutes. Another try. Caller with the phone number ending with 340. You can unmute your phone using *6. Try to come back. Ms. Lita, you can unmute your phone and address the commissions for up to 3 minutes. *6 to unmute your phone.
Hi, even my phone is famous. Thank you so much. This is Jess Lita. I live at 533 5th Street. I was a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee, a small part of helping to put all of this plan together. I wanted to say I'm, first of all, so excited to see so much of this move forward. We're asking a lot with 0 emissions and 0 deaths. And I think that that's appropriate. So I'm glad to see us being ambitious with our goals and with the plan being appropriately ambitious. We're talking a lot about the engineering and how this will be implemented. I hope when it comes time to talk about enforcement, we can talk about moving enforcement away from being policed, or at least with armed responders, and into a civilian or unarmed program. I would be really interested. There are other cities that are talking about doing or are doing this, and I think Ann Arbor could be a leader in that area as well. The last thing that I wanted to say was a huge thank you to staff. This has been a monumental undertaking and has crossed multiple departments. You guys have been really keeping your hand on the steering wheel for years on this. I'm grateful for your leadership. I'm grateful for your service, and Ann Arbor is going to be better when this gets implemented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 387. Caller with the phone number ending in 387. You can unmute your phone. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ken Clark. I live at 497 Larkspur Street in Ann Arbor. The Office of Sustainability has recently revised Ann Arbor's greenhouse gas emissions inventory. That office now recognizes that transportation is our greatest source of emissions, and they're still grossly underestimating those emissions compared to these recommendations. But nothing changed in this plan to match the change in our emissions estimate. This is a plan for 18% of our emissions coming from transportation. See page 17, the current online copy of the plan. Not the 30+%, that's our reality. Our community goal remains to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 0 by 2030. This is a fine plan for reducing our transportation emissions to 0 by 2060 or later. This plan won't result in even close to 0 emissions from our transportation sector by 2030. This is the most difficult problem we face in getting to 820. With regard to greenhouse gas emissions, this is unfortunately a wasted opportunity, which we'll be regretting in 2030. This plan should be changed to match our greenhouse gas emissions reality, and not just changing the number on page 17, but actually doing measures that would actually get us to 0 emissions by 2030. For the much larger emissions total that the Sustainability Office has now recognized. Thanks.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to address the Transportation and Planning Commission during this public hearing, please press *9 on your phone. All right. Oh.
Caller with the phone number ending with 340. Press *6. Go ahead.
Greetings, commissioners. My name is Luis Vasquez. I'm at 1442 Pontiac Trail in the north side.
And just wanted to echo some previous remarks, particularly from Ken Garber and Kirk Westfall. Yeah, we are way behind on greenhouse gas emissions. I share some of Mr. Garber's pessimism, but I'm hopeful after having read through the Vision Zero documents that we still have opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and I would urge you to move forward as swiftly as possible with the particular elements that were described, such as making downtown Ann Arbor much more of a pedestrian and bicycle friendly and oriented zone, to put in more protected bike lanes all throughout the city, protected bike lanes rather than just a painted line on the streets. I think it's a good plan, and it's a tremendous amount of time and effort has been spent on and years of work. So kudos to all of you for putting this together and pushing it forward. So I support wholeheartedly what it is that you're trying to do, and urge you to just continue. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to address the joint commissions for this public hearing, please press *9 on your phone.
I think all the callers on the line have spoken at this point, Chairman.
Excellent. So we will close the public hearing. Chair Kleinman, would you like to read the motion for the Transportation Commission?
Sure. Let me find it. So the proposed, nope, sorry, wrong place. Here we go. So the proposed motion is that the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission recommends that the City Planning Commission and City Council adopt the Ann Arbor Moving Together Towards Vision Zero City of Ann Arbor Comprehensive Transportation Plan as an element of the City of Ann Arbor Master Plan, and repeals the previous documents that this update replaces: the Ann Arbor Transportation Plan from 2009 and the Non-Motorized Transportation Plan from 2007 and the update from 2013. So can I get a motion for that one? I see Councilmember Briggs and seconded by Commissioner Lee. And then I think I hand it back to you.
I think that's right.
Great.
And we have two motions that are similar. But we have two. So let me read them both. This is for the Planning Commission. Resolved by the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission that the Ann Arbor Moving Together Towards Vision Zero City of Ann Arbor Comprehensive Transportation Plan, inclusive of all appendices, is adopted as an element of the City of Ann Arbor Master Plan. And resolved that the following documents are hereby repealed: the Ann Arbor Transportation Plan 2009, the Non-Motorized Transportation Plan of 2007, and the update from 2013. That's the first. And then the second is the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the City Council adopt the Ann Arbor Moving Together Towards Vision Zero City of Ann Arbor Comprehensive Transportation Plan as an element of the City of Ann Arbor Master Plan, and repeals the previous documents that this update replaces: the Ann Arbor Transportation Plan from 2009 and the Non-Motorized Transportation Plan from 2007 and the update in 2013. Moved by Commissioner Milstein, seconded by Commissioner Gibb Randall. Okay, we're in discussion. To facilitate this, I'm going to take a book from what I use in class, which is if you want to join the queue to talk, raise your real hand. If somebody's talking and you want to tack on a comment or have a follow-up question that's on that very same topic, use the raise hand button on Zoom so that we can sneak you in. Again, it's 8:10 now. I'm hoping that we can do this in about 30 minutes or so, but we'll talk as long as it needs to since this is important policy making, but just keep an eye on time. Commissioner Hess.
Yes, thank you, Chair Mills. I just wanted to make a clarifying question. There were some suggested modifications presented by Stacy Meekins, and I just wanted to clarify whether the motions are inclusive of those or not. So I just want to put that out there for your deliberation.
That is a great question that I'm actually going to put to staff, which is the discussion of what we're talking about, the motion passing. Where is the text that includes those elements?
So that has not been integrated into the draft. So those are descriptions of language that we intend to incorporate in the draft. From my perspective, I am comfortable if the Planning Commission is and the Transportation Commission is moving forward with those, with staff to incorporate those ideas. I think Ms. Meekins did a good job of sort of summarizing not only what they are, but where they will go. Alternatively, if for some reason you think that they are of a more significant nature and you would like to see that information incorporated into the document prior to your action, so be your direction. But I guess I would start from the suggestion that the plan is being updated with that presentation material. That presentation is available on will be available in Legistar for the record of the meeting. So everybody has now seen the benefit of those language. And I would suggest you start from the perspective that those changes are now incorporated as identified since the April draft and as proposed by staff. A shorter way, you can take action, and I am presuming that you are agreeing to all those. If you would rather see the draft revised, then Planning Commission can take that action to postpone until those have been incorporated and you can see exactly how they are incorporated. I don't think the changes are substantive, though, or I'm not comfortable with staff proceeding and resolving those as this heads to City Council.
All right. Discussion of that, Commissioner Gibb-Randall, and then I'm looking for hands. Commissioner Gibb-Randall, and then Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I am curious about the addition of Newport that went in, and I'm curious about the transportation group's balancing act of taking down landmark trees in order to be able to make roads more accommodating to bikes. I know that road has been studied a lot, and it's really, really difficult to be able to make that happen with bike lanes and not taking out like huge old oaks. And so I'm just wondering, during your deliberations, how you looked at that balancing act of existing natural features that the city also has goals around, as well as incorporating these transportation goals for connectivity and things like that. I don't have any easy answers on that one. I'm just curious if that was part of your deliberation in the planning of these two, because some lifts are a lot easier than others in terms of adding corridors to this. So that can be, staff or transportation commission member or the folks that put together the plan. Just curious how you all struck that balance.
Ms. Meekins, and I also saw Mr. Cooper.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify. Newport Road was added. There's a distinction in the plan on which routes are recommended to be the all ages and abilities network versus just part of a broader network. And Newport Road, we included as part of the broader network, recognizing that it would be really difficult to get a very comfortable facility with dedicated space for bicyclists. So Newport Road, for instance, might be a route by adding some shared lane markings. And so it's not going to be comfortable for everybody, but it would be noted for people who are comfortable riding on that type of facility.
So in other words, keeping the lanes, keeping like basically the width of the road the same, but just adding paint that alerts drivers to the fact that bikers are going to be using this. Is that what I'm saying? Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
and we're not designating specific designs, but that is something that I could envision on Newport.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
In addition to that, I think it's important to note that, as I described in my introductory comments, where we were 15 years ago is light years away behind where we are today. And Newport, it was about 2 or 3 years ago, we striped the bike lane on one side and there's parking on the other side. By including it as a key bicycling corridor, perhaps as we move forward with planned implementation, we could pick up issues of perhaps removing more parking on street in order to get bike lanes on both sides, as the plan might be seeking with this recommendation. But I also want to use this opportunity to point out that a lot of what the plan is that, which is a plan of recommended ideas in order to achieve a transportation result, and that we as staff establish projects. And in those projects, each project has its own public participation process, and those most impacted or most benefited by the improvement are given fair opportunity to help shape the final design. And we received numerous comments in the plan development process that folks wanted a more prescriptive plan, but this is more of a strategic plan where we're outlining in broad senses the direction we want to go, and then the opportunities will be pursued as projects emerge over time. And I hope that that is consistent with the direction that the commissions are comfortable with. It's clearly a direction that we heard from the community. Thank you.
Commissioner Gabrandel, anything else? Oh, no.
She said no. Can you hear us?
I can hear you now. Sorry. Technical issues in the Mills house. Apologies. I had Commissioner Hammerschmidt next.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to everyone who was involved in this plan. This is incredible. I love the addition of the glossary. I think that's really important. I have a couple of other terms that I would love to see included if you are amenable to that. The words equity and equitable are all over this document, and I think it's really important to define what exactly we mean by that. And then in strategy number 20, and I think you might remember I was talking about the strategy with the last one, underrepresented voices. I am not an expert on this, but I think I'm not sure that underrepresented is the right term to use. I think we might want to look into, it might be underserved or under-resourced. I've had feedback on that before, but again, I'm not the expert. I think we just might want to look a little bit more into the correct term that we want to be using. Regardless, that term also I think needs to be in the glossary. And while I'm on that point, I know that the comment I made about strategy number 20 last time was that I know that these aren't prioritized, but I'd like to see it higher up in that order. I just think if we're serious about equity in this city, we need to do everything possible to show that we're serious about it. And I think elevating it, understanding that these are not in priority order, it would just sort of show that we're actually, this is something that is very serious. It's near the top, even though I understand they're not in priority order. So I think those two additions would be really great. A question on the lane reduction comment that Mr. Westfall brought up. Does the plan, the way that those action steps are identified, does it then make it harder to for staff or for any commissioners to work on a lane reduction project that is not in an already identified corridor or that is not part of a reconstruction project? And I'm not sure, I guess I'm asking staff this question.
So we have relied upon standard engineering practice and the characteristics of both the area that the road exists within, as well as the traffic on the road, in order to evaluate appropriate lane reconfiguration recommendations. So it's not going to make it any harder. Clearly, the issue in the city has been with nearly 20 years of implementing lane reduction strategies. We've covered most of them that are actually feasible. Now, there may be a short segment here or there that some of which are still in the plan to be done, and there may be others that, as a result of traffic volume changes with changing behavior, that may in the future emerge. But the language itself does not make it any more difficult, but it doesn't. I think what the commenter wanted was language that might facilitate it, and the issue could come up through a CIP development. It could come up through the annual project identification if there's something that we as staff are not pursuing. So that, in essence, the language is neutral. We've been at this. I think we're probably one of the leaders in the state, if not the nation, in actually implementing lane reductions. As one of the other commenters, Scott Cole, talked about, we even persuaded MDOT to do one on a trunk line, which is probably the only one in the state, right? Anyhow, so we're keen on this. We see all the benefits both for safety as well as multimodality. And if there are more to do, we'd love to do them.
Okay, thank you. We also got a public comment. Councilmember Briggs, was that directly related to that? Because I'm going to move on.
It is actually, if you don't mind, I realize this might be the right time.
Yeah.
I would like, personally, like to see some of the language in this document change before it comes to council. I think on page 37, if it just, in next action steps, if it said evaluate opportunities for lane reductions instead of, and didn't include the in-corridor reconstruction projects, that would broaden it a little bit. And then it would, I think there's something also on page 129 around that. I think we may, I'm hoping, I guess, that we find that we might be more ambitious about what the numbers, around the traffic volumes and how ambitious we want to be on certain roads about lane reconfigurations. So that would make me feel a lot more comfortable. I don't know.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, those are types of language changes that I think, again, based on an action of the bodies this evening, that staff can agree to. We're not suggesting it only occur with road reconsideration. So if there's an issue of can we broaden that language similar to the other areas that have been outlined as direction for us to make adjustments, we would accept that and be more than happy to bring that back to the body.
Commissioner Hammers, I see Mr. Hall's or Commissioner Hall's hand. Is it directly on this or is it the next thing after this? Oh, you're muted though. Go ahead and unmute. Commissioner Hammerschmidt, I'm coming back to you.
It's just a general comment. It's not a response to this comment.
Okay, let's let Commissioner Hammerschmidt finish off her list and then we'll come right to you, Commissioner Hall.
Really quick. We had a public or a comment submitted about motorcycles and how he didn't feel that they were properly represented in this plan. And I would just wanted to hear from either Ms. Meekins or Mr. Cooper how motorcycles were considered and if you saw that comment and how you might respond.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
So the first thing, I have to admit that since 1978, I have been a motorcyclist. Many of the folks that are in this meeting are aware of that. We did not, and we do not differentiate motorcycles, if you will, for special treatment. But that as we conducted all of the analysis, a motorcycle is counted as a vehicle, whether it's an ADT or volume count. Motorcycles that are involved in crashes are generally recorded as vehicle crashes. So although as a motorcyclist, I'm intimately aware of the safety concerns of motorcycling. As we look through the statistics that we've looked at in Vision Zero, nothing popped out at us that said that there's a particular location in Ann Arbor where special treatment is needed for the motorcycling community. With that, I think that it's important to note that we don't differentiate for trucks or buses or other types of vehicles besides motorcycles. And I don't necessarily mean that that's always correct, but at least as we've fashioned a long-range city infrastructure plan, the particular users, unless they stand out as being, an area that needs attention, they're included as a matter of our general analysis.
Okay, thanks. And you being a motorcyclist, I think I would assume that you feel comfortable with how this was addressed in the plan. I don't know anything about them. My last thing is just a request for, at some point, I would love to hear, as we eventually move into a master planning process, lessons learned from this process that you guys just went through, particularly as it relates to community engagement and conducting it virtually. I think it would really enlighten us as we kind of move ahead, since I think you guys did a lot of this during COVID. I don't think virtual engagement opportunities will go away. So I think it would be really great to hear a debrief at some point. And that is it for now. Thanks.
Commissioner Hall.
Yeah, so I've got a couple things I'm wondering about. The first one, kind of like the second one that comes after this, but I'm kind of wondering how much flexibility is there to actually make changes to this plan? Because I know this has to go through a bunch of different steps of review, and it seems like certain changes would in fact require it to go back to other bodies. And I know they're talking like some of these changes can be made. So I'm kind of wondering about that, because it's probably not helpful to talk about changes that can't even be made unless we have to do like tons of things, and also to keep that in mind if there's some requirement to go back to certain bodies.
Someone on staff?
I'll just address it from a master planning perspective. This is a bit of an inflection point for the Planning Commission and the Transportation Commission to carry forth this plan, which has come out of a lot of community engagement in its current state or with modifications. But at this point, from a technical perspective, the next phase of this would be adoption by the Planning Commission, and then ultimately City Council, a recommendation by the Transportation Commission, obviously, as well. But legislatively, requires action by the Planning Commission and the City Council. Both the Planning Commission has the ability to modify the plan at this juncture, but to the point of those changes, the comfort level as to whether or not you as the commissions want to empower staff to make the changes based on your direction, or to say we want to see another version of this before we're willing to take action, that's really up to your comfort level. But it doesn't necessitate that it necessarily has to go back to any of the previous engagement processes. This point is the Planning Commission has that authority, and the City Council obviously has that authority as well to ultimately approve or reject them.
Okay, so I guess I will point out my one issue with this plan that I mentioned in one of the previous hearings, but did not get addressed in the final draft. And that is that the section about transit service, having goals for improving transit service, sets no goals for improving Sunday or holiday service. And I kind of feel like that shouldn't be ignored, because right now our Sunday transit service is pretty bare. And if we're not going to set a goal for improving that, that may remain pretty bare. It's pretty much once an hour, except for Washtenaw, and running until like 7 p.m., which isn't even sunset during the summer. And that's long been one of my complaints about transit, and it seems like we should set a goal to improve that.
Discussion, Commissioner Briggs and then Ms. Meekins.
I just want to say I agree.
I'll point to Eli on whether or not we want to add a specific target, as some of that is AAATA's purview. We did add some language to that strategy, though, to address Sunday service. It is on page 90 of the current plan.
Yeah, I think I saw a mention of Sunday service, but I just the fact that it wasn't that we had weekday and Saturday goals, but not Sunday, told me that it just gave me the impression that, yeah, that's going to remain 60-minute service until 7 p.m. in general. We might make a few tweaks here and there. It just did not give me the impression that it was a priority.
Well, again, as Stacy has pointed out, and we're not kicking this back and forth, I think the language that we've added to the plan that she's pointed out on page 90 outlines our attempting to address your interest as expressed, recognizing that the city does not provide the transit service, but we collaborate and coordinate with the AAATA. So we make reference to having reliable or having transit as a reliable option into the later hours in Sunday, and that we can continue to encourage the AAATA to provide that. But if we put a policy in our plan, recognizing that we, the city, do not deliver transit service that's more detailed than that, it may accommodate your issue in language, but I'm not sure that it's going to affect what is delivered in the street. So we're open to strengthening the language if that's what the desire of the body is, understanding the limitations of what we, the city, can do.
So are you saying that AAATA is resistant to adding Sunday service or something?
I'm not going to describe that they're resistant to it. They're undertaking their own planning process, and they make resource allocation decisions based on their planning and their planning processes and their budget. So I believe that there's a AAATA representative on the Transportation Commission who might be better positioned to discuss their decision-making process.
Looked like Commissioner Smith, you raised your hand. Was that to want to add in here?
Just to simply say we are engaging in our own long-range process right now, set to be done around March, and would welcome input along those regards.
Any other comments on this issue or anything else? You can give me a wave. Commissioner Briggs, and then Commissioner Kleinman.
Say thank you for all of the incorporation of my previous comments and the process. It's been really great. A few things I wanted to get clarification. It looks like one of the recommended additions, it alluded to, I can't remember what the verbiage is now, is around MDOT. And could you explain a little bit more what the intent is in terms of adding that in? And how that might relate to Jackson and Huron. That might tailor my comments a little bit more.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
So the first issue, and Councilmember Briggs, thank you for raising the question about Jackson Huron, because it allows me to say that Huron corridor is identified as a priority corridor in the plan. So if you look at the maps, you'll see that it does receive attention based on the crash pattern that's out there from Ravenna towards the downtown. With regard to the revising the language to further collaborate or coordinate with MDOT, that was directly in response to input we had received from one of the commenters tonight that raised the issue of lane reconfigurations, wanted specifically to address, for the plan to address what we do with the state. And again, unfortunately, we as staff recognize that we have certain limits in terms of our authority relative to the state and its trunk lines. And so the thing that we can commit to do, and that we've added in, or will add into the plan, is that we will coordinate with them on an annual basis and share with them our experience relative to crashes that are occurring on state facilities that might benefit from lane reconfigurations. And so the additional thinking, which is much more complicated than we can get into, is whether or not there's a turn back program where the state would turn those roads back over to the local government. There has been some consideration of that with regard to some streets. It's just an issue that is subject to a lot more negotiations about what we would be taking over and how we would be able to manage and administer that going forward. That is well beyond where we are in the evolution of this plan. If that becomes an issue that after a year or two of coordination with MDOT, the community wants to pursue that, I would say at that time we could extend a new policy as to that becoming a priority. But I would suggest that that would need to be really fully fleshed out from a financial standpoint when we're looking at taking over high volume, high capacity roads.
Okay, that helps. I want to make sure that there is enough language, and it's difficult. I know that it looks like it's that sort of the section between the Jackson Huron split and Maine is listed as a tier 2 corridor, still two right now in terms of priority. Is that right? Maybe. And I guess my concern, just to kind of make sure that commenter's questions are, the neighborhood association's issues are being met, is that we've long recognized that this corridor and many of our other MDOT corridors are some of our most problematic in the city, and recognizing that we don't necessarily have a lot of control over them. But I just want to make sure that there is really clear language in the plan that enables us, when we go to MDOT and MDOT says, where is this in your plans, for us to say, no, see, our community adopted this as a clear priority for us to be working on, even though I recognize that our limitations there, and it just doesn't feel very clear to me. So I just want to make sure, or to the community. So I just want to figure out how we make sure that that's there, recognizing our limitations.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
So I appreciate the question, because this is a new document for us as staff as well. And there are two different areas, two different maps that the Huron-Jackson corridor actually shows up. And so on what is page 6 of the plan, there is a capital priority tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And what you'll see there is Huron is a tier 1 capital priority. So it receives high priority for consideration of investment. The tier 2 is a map later in the plan that addresses the safety focus areas. So there are other issues beyond safety out there, which is why the tier 1 category is for capital projects, even though the safety issue only brought it into the second grouping, which, when I say only the second grouping, is still an area that needs attention.
So from the perspective of how you're going to have to interact with MDOT in the future, which do you feel like there is, I want to make sure that there is never a question that this is a priority, that there is a lot of work that the community wants to see done here in terms of traffic calming and new facilities, and that's easy to point to and to justify. The city council has said, hopefully, when they hopefully adopts this plan and says, hey, that you've got the justification there.
I would absolutely agree with that statement. Tier 1 capital priority investment is it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think that will make the residents happy, even though it's not spelled out quite as explicitly. And then there's a small little issue, and then I'll end with the bigger one. So there is in the plan in the short term recommendations, expand A2 Be Safe program. And I want to make sure, sometimes we get real excited about, I'm glad we're doing education. It's important to do community education around safety and around different issues, but it's easy also to put a a fair amount of money into educational materials that say, look both ways at crosswalks and wear bright colored clothing, that don't necessarily move the needle very much in our community. So I just want to make, and sometimes we're not always that innovative with educational programming that comes out of governmental entities. So I want to make sure, I think it'd be nice to say something like evaluate and expand the A2B SAFE program, just to make sure we're checking in on that program, that it's producing, it's effective. And that leads a little bit, because I know in the budget recommendation for this year, there's $133,000 for pedestrian education. And that might be one of my concerns that I'll raise later. So that was one piece. And then the other one is broader, points to a couple of questions raised by the community, which is just, does this help us? Will this plan, is it aligned enough with our carbon neutrality goals and our A20 plan, that if we implement, if we find the resources to implement this plan, that we are actually going to hit our A20 plans, our carbon neutrality goals? I mean, have these strategies been lined up in that regard? Is it? I guess that's my question.
So I guess I'll raise my hand. Yeah, I think the difficult question to answer is that larger second question, which is how aligned are our decisions about transportation infrastructure with our A20. And so at the highest level, what I can say to you is, if we do not implement the recommendations in this plan, there is no chance whatsoever. When I look at the entire suite of recommendations in the plan, including a community-wide, all ages and all users bicycling system, a robust transit operation with a significant intercept park and ride, with the value pricing and the parking management strategies, I think there's more than enough policy guidance to affect the way that transportation is perceived in the community. But at the end of the day, it becomes a human behavior issue. We can create all these systems and we can price them accordingly to encourage people to use them. And I think that becomes part of the issue with how closely can you align these strategies with the Vision Zero plan and the A20 plan. So I think they're absolutely complementary, but I want to be clear that there's not much more we could add in terms of policies on a transportation plan. We're going to have a tough row to hoe to implement all the recommendations that are in this plan, and I look forward to that challenge. And as we have seen the needle moved on triple ATA ridership based on the millage votes that they've received over the past decade, that we've seen our level of bicycling increased by 150, 200% over the last 15 years, that there is clearly opportunities to build it and they will come, and to attract different behaviors. But I'm not quite at a place where I would say to you comfortably that we're going to get there. I know we're on a trajectory to be a leader, both in the state and in the country, which might mean the world, but there's all of the European communities that don't have the freedom and flexibility we have in North America. But that said, I think it's a fair question, and you need to hold our feet as staff to the fire as we go forward in time to see if those shifts that we're looking for are occurring. Are we delivering the systems to accommodate the alternative forms of mobility that are carbon zero?
Thank you. And I appreciate those comments. I guess I want to make sure that the timelines that we have in the back, especially around the real development of facilities. For example, I know the previous draft had 4 miles, adding 4 miles a year of low stress bikeways, I think, and now it's at 5. But we know that we have to, in the next 10 years, dramatically shift what our infrastructure looks like, which obviously we will struggle with finding the funding for that. But I want to make sure that the timelines are aligned on the development of some of that physical infrastructure, particularly on the bicycling, which I think we've lagged behind on. We're doing great things on it, but I think we focused a lot on pedestrian issues over the last 10 years, rightfully so. But I think we're playing a little catch up on some of the protected bike lanes and things like that, maybe that some other communities have moved to a little sooner than us. And so to the degree that we are making sure that, particularly in the bicycle facilities area, that those timelines are aligned to help us make sure that we reach our goals. We have to figure out the resources piece of it, but that is my last comment.
And I would just say too, add in that this is one of many elements of our kind of master plan that is constantly evolving too. And so I just put that in perspective. Mr. Leonard, go ahead.
Well, and just to further tack on Commissioner Mills, it's also the land use decisions we make. Recently, the discussion about transit oriented zoning, they're interrelated. The more successful we are in the regulatory framework that spurs and encourages the type of development that creates the demand for those sources and opportunities for those other modes. I appreciate your comment, because it's not just the transportation aspect of our master plan portfolio, but also the land use decisions that we make.
Chair Kleinman, go ahead. But while we're on this, I just wanted to tack in the one thing that I want to highlight. There's the, state law about why this comes before us. But in previous discussions, just for transportation commissioners to know, we looked at the things that are assigned to planning. We know that there are things that are specifically about zoning, which is normally in our wheelhouse. To the extent that we can work together, I expect that we will need to work together going forward for a lot of these things, because, they have rightfully been assigned kind of to our realm. And the one small edit that I would make before this goes to the next version is when I did the quick catch on zoning, just preparing for this meeting to make sure I saw all those things, the transit supported development, which is in there, there's a weird text thing and it's not showing up.
I caught that this evening. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's fine. It's just ironic that it's the one thing, one of the
one thing that you guys care about. I'm sorry.
Not the one thing that we care about. We care about all
no,
of it.
Of course not.
But yeah. All right. So I expect, this is holding us to working together, and we want to be, making the other policy changes that are necessary to implement these great plans that we've put so much time and effort into, that you all have put so much time and effort into. So, Chair Kleinman.
Thank you. So I just wanted to briefly express my gratitude to staff and the consulting team for the work that's gone into this plan. I'm really excited about it. And I also wanted to just sort of share with our colleagues on planning that this came through Transportation Commission more than once. We had many opportunities to participate in the public engagement. And I was really thrilled to be able to watch the evolution of the plan over time. The feedback and the recommendations that commissioners gave, that members of the public gave as part of those things were integrated into this plan in really careful ways. And so I feel very confident in the process that got us here. I know nothing is ever going to be perfect or address every single detail. I appreciate the flexibility here that it lays out a vision for us without always getting so very specific, that it really gives us room to take a variety of approaches as we deal with the realities of the next few years. So I just sort of wanted to share that bit of background for everyone, and I'm really excited about it.
I want to note that I've been lousy at holding us to 30 minutes. We're now at 40. Are there any final, I think that's a great thing to end on before voting, but is there any final comments, questions, concerns? Mr. Leonard, but I think it might be related to what Commissioner Hammerschmidt is raising her hand on.
It's related to what Commissioner Hammerschmidt said earlier. I just wanted to touch on a couple of not solve Commissioner Hammerschmidt's concerns, but maybe lend some degree of comfort. The city, first of all, I appreciate the comments about equity and equitable and underrepresented versus underserved. I think that not unlike a lot of other communities, we are learning new language, and we're learning our local history and what we should do better going forward. To that end, the city is starting and is resourcing an initiative to improve the equity of our engagement across the organization in a variety of ways. And so whether or not those concerns are, whether or not there were changes memorialized in this draft, I just want to share with both Commissioner Hammerschmidt and everybody, of course, is that this is something that the city is taking on very seriously and sort of specifically. There is a group at the city that's starting to sort of in the beginning phases of it, but Ms. Coleman's part of this as well. We are very serious about getting better at engagement to address some of those questions that you're talking about, as not specific to transportation, but as the city as a whole. So that is a small way of saying, even if not everybody says change the order of the strategies, I just wanted to share that we hear that, and the city as an organization, and particularly Administrator Crawford, is internalizing this and tasking us with an organization to frankly get better at this. So
Can I respond really
Go
quickly?
ahead, Commissioner Hammerschmidt, and then
Thank you, Mr.
Commissioner
Leonard.
Parsons.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. I just want to make sure those two terms end up in the glossary, whatever. I mean, that's I just think it's really important they're defined. There are definitions out there for them, so it shouldn't be that hard to do, but I'm really excited that the city is doing this. My organization is too, and I think it's just really important for all of us, like in this entire country, to be doing this work. So thank you.
Commissioner Parsons.
Thank you, guys, and thank you to the presenters. Thank you to staff, and particularly the consulting group. It's an amazing draft. I want to pick up on a little bit of what we were just discussing just now, and frame it maybe in process. To quote one of the callers, we need to move on this as fast as possible, and then to quote another one, we'll see what the final draft looks like. And so I'm trying to balance these. I'd like to see what the final draft looks like, including glossary additions and definitions that we agree to. And yet I do very much trust staff and the work that they've done already. So my process question is, what does a delay cost this process if planning were to wait to give its final firm approval as opposed to an approval now with conditions?
Speaking from the Planning Commission, for the Planning Commission, because I feel all powerful, I think that would most likely, I'm guessing the nature of these changes are such that they could be incorporated relatively quickly. I would, if that was the desire of the Planning Commission, speaking for them, I would probably recommend that they postpone this to the May 4th agenda. Although that will be a robust agenda, I think that the bulk of these changes are probably just going to be seeing and gaining confidence that they have been incorporated into the draft. That would generally put the plan still on track for a June presentation to the City Council. But I would also appreciate Mr. Cooper's perspective on that as well, because this is in many ways more his baby.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, just looking for the unmute button, sorry. So I think that there's a couple of different ways, and it really is the comfort of the boards. What you can do is conditionally approve it. I think Mr. Leonard's correct that Stacy and I will bang that language out pretty quickly here. The issue is, would you empower us and your representatives, meaning Mr. Leonard, Ms. Coleman, that we could share the language with them and they could circulate it to you, so that you're okay with having authorized it tonight, and then allow us to bring it to council? Or, and I can't speak on behalf of the Transportation Commission and their schedule. I think they meet also later in May. So both bodies could have an official bite of the apple, but either way, the types of changes that we're thinking about are minor word amendments that could be done fairly quickly. Can't do it here at the table at this juncture, but I would expect that very quickly we'll have language, and it's the discretion of the bodies as to whether they want to empower staff to move forward with the direction you're giving us and with what we've already committed to, or to compel us to bring it back.
Commissioner Milstein adding in on this point.
Thanks, Chair Mills. So I'm comfortable moving forward and empowering at least the planning staff to do the work that that we've outlined here. So, and this is not unusual for the Planning Commission to let staff figure out things before it goes to City Council. So I'm perfectly comfortable, at least from the Planning Commission end, voting on it this evening.
I'm seeing some nods. I have Ms. Coleman, and then I saw Commissioner Gibb Randall, and one of them check back in with no. Ignore Commissioner Gibb Randall, take her out of the queue. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to chime in with one more process consideration, and I don't know if Mr. Leonard already addressed this. My internet was cutting out a bit. I hope you can hear me okay. But in terms of process, if this were to come to the Planning Commission in their early May meeting, the Transportation Commission does not meet again until May 19th, which is after both of the Planning Commission's May meetings. So it's been typical that the Transportation Commission recommends something to Planning Commission and City Council. And if the action is not taken tonight, just so that it's clear to all that it would be likely that the Planning Commission would act first and then the Transportation Commission would come later. So the Transportation Commission would be recommending just to City Council, or they can make the statement to Planning Commission, but at that point it would be symbolic. It would be past the point of their action.
Can I maybe get some quick thumbs up from Transportation Commissioners if we feel comfortable entrusting staff to make these revisions as we've done on other things? If that's, I see a couple of thumbs, a few thumbs. So I think both commissions, it sounds like, are good with moving this forward tonight.
Anything else for staff? And I want to just check in with staff and make sure you've got it. You take good notes. Yes, go ahead.
Well, that's what I appreciate that. I wanted to just have maybe a touch point. I am, in my mind, the draft incorporates all the changes that Ms. Meekins already presented as part of her presentation. We are adding equity and equitable to the glossary to clearly define those. We are striking language on page 37 specific to part of lane reconstruction, just generalizing the reconfiguration of lanes a little bit larger. I am not, from my lens, I didn't hear as, I am interpreting not as much head nodding, with all due respect to the commenters, regarding changing the order of the strategies, changing underrepresented, or any further language on transit service on Sundays and other times. So that's my sort of filter of what I'm hearing changes incorporated and other comments. So I'm happy to be corrected, but I would say that that is the sort of set of changes should we proceed.
Commissioner Briggs. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Coleman.
I would just add one, and I don't know that it even needs to be said, but the change that Commissioner Mills pointed out to a text change relative to transit supported zoning, that would also be made.
Sorry, I tune out Commissioner Mills sometimes.
Yeah, so do my kids. Go ahead, Commissioner Briggs.
I think also on page 129, there might also be something about lane reductions or lane reconfigurations, and I'm not looking at it right now if that's associated language that can be just broadened a little bit. I'm not probably.
I did look at that one. I just want to touch on that because it does say, it says e.g. street resurfacing or reconstruction. So that's already broader than the other one, and I just wanted to.
Okay. Great. If it's already broad, kind of broaden out and not just, that would be great. And then the other piece, I would just, I don't know if there's support for interest in others to move to, I don't mean by this a formal evaluation necessarily, just to be clear, but thoughtful, more on the lines of thoughtful consideration and discussions before just expanding the A2 Safe program. I think that program there have been questions about it in the past from the community, and I think it's worth taking a look at our educational programs before expanding them. But
I see at least a couple head nods, but I also saw Mr. Cooper raise his hand associated with this, and then I'm coming to you, Commissioner Dish.
So I appreciate the comment related to the A2B Safe. This is one of those old-fashioned dilemmas. On one hand, the city has modeled a program that's citywide, community-wide, all-encompassing A2B Safe, and then we have our own unique needs within the transportation world. And so I want to at least articulate to the council member that we work with our communications experts in order to develop the messaging around our transportation. We will hang it under the broader umbrella of A2B Safe, but I do not believe it's being driven by the same models of the A2B Safe, but it's that branding that the community has when we discuss safety. I hope that's at some level comforting.
not entirely, I will say, but I'll just leave it at that.
Commissioner Dish.
I wanted to just say that given that the word underrepresented is being used in the context of engagement and the need to do extra outreach, I think it is the appropriate word, or it strikes me as the appropriate word, because the concern is with representation, not service provision. It really is with voice and advocacy. And so underrepresented strikes me as okay, but I would also happily hear that I have not captured the heart and soul of Commissioner Hammerschmidt's concern.
Go for it.
Again, I'm not an expert. I think it might be fine. I think it might be worth trying to define though. So Mr. Leonard, I won't say like, I definitely think it needs to be in there, but it might just be worth some staff consideration and discussion on whether or not it should be just explored a little more and expanded on within the glossary to say exactly what we mean, because there are so many terms that are out there right now. So they might just help clarify, because Commissioner Dish, you're probably right.
If there's a question, it's worthwhile for us to include it in the glossary, just to be very clear about our intention that voices that it's a segment of our community that we're not hearing from. So we will, I think adding that to the glossary makes sense.
Okay, and you guys don't have to change the order. I'm not saying you have to change the order. I was just trying to make a point. Just leave it though. I think it's fine.
We do our best to make everybody happy, but we just can't always.
One point on the equitable engagement. I recognize that Commissioner Hammerschmidt's point that there are lots of definitions out there, but as Mr. Leonard pointed out, there is an equitable engagement initiative kicking off, and part of that is to reach agreement on how this community is defining equitable community engagement. And we actually aren't there yet, where we don't have a definition as a community for that. So I support that we look into this further. We see what definitions are out there from reputable community engagement organizations that we might look to as at least a starting point, while we have not yet as a community defined that term. But I just want to when we agree that we're going to let staff look, if the agreement from the commissions is that they let staff look into this, that we have some flexibility to see, like for example, it may be that the term we can define is inclusive participation, because I pulled out my manual on public participation that we follow in the city, and that's the term that we do have a definition for, is inclusive participation. So just having some flexibility there is what I would request. But if the commissions feel strongly that there needs to be something said about equitable engagement, we'll look for that, but just know that there is an initiative that's planning to work with the community to come up with definitions that we can agree to as a community.
Kayla, why don't we do both? Why don't we'll define it, but let's also, I'm sure we can put a footnote or something in that just sort of acknowledges this coming initiative of the city and just sort of endorses that, sort of recognizes that it's a value of this plan. And just sort of, I'm not saying that this plan sets us on that course, but I think we can find a way to acknowledge that that is underway, and that process might help to define that more fully for the.
Sure, that works for me.
Commissioner Hammersmith, really quick, because I've
I know,
been
I'm
doing
really
a lousy
sorry.
job keeping us to 9 o'clock.
This is why our meetings go so long.
Exactly.
No, so I just wanted to clarify, I'm perfectly comfortable with giving staff flexibility. I just want to clarify, I'm not just talking about community engagement, like I'm talking about equity just as a broad term, and specifically equity versus equality. And I think that can even be sort of like worked into the definition. I have one in a report that I'm releasing in a month that basically defines equity sort of compared to equality, and just how that's really important in the community. So it's not really just about participation and engagement. It's really just, how that impacts all of the decisions that we're making as a community. And now I'm going to stop talking, I promise.
Commissioner Dish, you had your hand up. Closing thoughts? Okay. Chair Kleinman, do you want to take the?
Oh yeah. All right. Let me figure
Can I
out.
actually ask one more question?
Yes, especially since you're the editor of this, to make
Yeah.
sure that that you have good instructions. Go
I'm
for it.
unclear where we landed on the A2B safe.
This seems like there's folks on Transportation Commission that have much stronger opinions than I certainly have seen among planning commissioners. So what I heard was, well, I don't know enough about it. So go ahead, Commissioner Hess.
Yeah, maybe if I could just take a moment to address Councilmember Briggs' concerns. We are looking at, if we do broaden the program, if this does get funded through council, looking at some other models that we can use. So for example, Grand Rapids had a fairly successful campaign called Driving Change. That's one of the things we've already been in discussions with them. The other thing I want to note too, part of the Be Safe campaign, while I appreciate that maybe it wasn't quite as, that if we have bigger budgets, we can reach more people and we can kind of broaden our messaging. But I do want to remind everyone that there was that changing driver behavior that was part of the Be Safe campaign, where we did kind of measure the effectiveness of different approaches for vehicles stopping for pedestrians in the crosswalk. And there was kind of an enforcement piece, there was an education piece, there was a encouragement piece, is all of that. So I think what we'll do is kind of take the lessons learned from that and broaden them, especially again, if we have that budget support moving forward. So I don't think we'll just blow off the dust off an old campaign and then call it done. I do want to reassure you that there's a lot of opportunity for us to kind of reach new audiences and use new messaging materials to really hone in on the message that we want out in the community. And, we'd be all ears too. If there are suggestions from Transportation Commission, Planning Commission, or others in the community on things that they would like us to see, I'm sure we can be receptive to those as well. So,
Commissioner Boland, I think I saw your hand. No, calling it off. All right. Does that provide better direction for what to do with this? I mean, I heard both, like, what's actually in the works, what staff has in the works. This is outsider interpretation. What staff has in the works might not match exactly what the language is in here, because what I'm reading from the plan is we're expanding this Be Safe program, which that's what I heard was the concern. Instead, it was expand education, maybe as part of it, be safe. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
I think Eli and Raymond and I can work on an edit to recognize the work that's already underway, and that would address Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah, just really quickly to build on Commissioner Hess's observation and what the Councilmember Briggs had outlined. It's really what's not in the plan is discussion about an evaluation matrix, so that we're not only expanding the campaign messaging, but that we have metrics to evaluate how effective our investments are. Are we hitting the targets? Are we making the changes? And I see that as a major opportunity to make a minor adjustment to the language in the plan to emphasize, because that was what we did with the changing driving behavior, was we added all those metrics to how effective was it at the end. And I think I see some positive nodding. So I think that's the direction that we'll be moving towards.
Okay. Ms. Meekins, you're good now? Awesome. Anything else? Go for it, Chair Kleinman.
I think I am just going to hand it straight over to Ms. Coleman for a roll call vote.
All right, I'll call your name and please indicate your vote. I guess yes or no for the motion that has been read. Commissioner Boland.
Yes.
Councilmember Briggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Felt.
See his thumb.
Oh, yes, sorry, I didn't see you. Commissioner Hadamaki.
Yes.
Commissioner Hull.
Yes.
Commissioner Kleinman.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Parsons.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
It passes unanimously.
Back to you, Chair Mills.
Mr. Leonard, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, so the motions are as read with the changes discussed. Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Milstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibb Randall,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Carries unanimously.
Back over to you, Chair Kleinman.
Great, thank you. So now we're moving on to Healthy Streets, which we're going to start with a presentation from staff, and then we're going to do it the Transportation Commission way, which is to discuss and then have our motion. And yeah, I think over to you. I'm not sure who's giving this one, if it's Raymond or Eli.
Raymond.
Great, thanks.
Okay, is my screen showing properly here?
It is showing. It is not in presentation view at this point.
There we go.
There we go.
All right, Commissioners, Raymond Hess. I am Transportation Manager for the City of Ann Arbor, and I'll take a few moments of your time to talk about the Healthy Streets program. Just as a reminder to everyone on the call, obviously we're open to a discussion from all commissioners, but this item is specific to the Transportation Commission. What we are seeking today is a recommendation from the Transportation Commission to City Council. Before I get into the presentation, just as a very brief overview of some of the history, you may recall Healthy Streets were launched last year in response to COVID-19 and the needs for safe social distancing. And so what this led to was a suite of projects that kind of reconfigured roadways and made neighborhood streets closed to through traffic to encourage people to walk and bike safely and allow for safe social distancing. Based on a recommendation from the Transportation Commission back in December to re-up the program in 2021, we went to City Council. They authorized some design funding in January, And so what you're going to see today is a result of several months of planning, design, and outreach in terms of what is being proposed to carry forward to City Council. So just a couple things to piggyback on what I just said. You know, COVID-19, I don't know if you've heard, it's still out there. And the need for social distancing still exists. But then in addition to that, the important part of Healthy Streets is there's an alignment with our carbon neutrality goals as set forth in the A20 plan, as well as the transportation plan goals, the draft that you considered tonight, as well as the existing non-motorized plan that still is in force. One of the things I will note as I go through the presentation, we've made a lot of modifications based on what we learned from last year. We tried not to be tone deaf to some of the concerns that we heard. We tried to make adjustments to be responsive to those concerns. And so far, we've gotten some positive feedback on those changes as a result. One of the things I do want to note that is not included, the Merchant Association's downtown closures. These are the intermittent weekend closures, like on Main Street, for example, Washington, Liberty, places like that. Those are coordinated separately through the Merchant Associations. We do coordinate with them on that. We're actually coordinating with them right now on an issue. So they are separate, but they are a coordinated effort. Similarly, the Downtown Development Authority's People Friendly Streets program is currently undergoing public engagement on their efforts. They had some engagement opportunities, I believe, in March, and there will be another round in the future. And so those are also an extension of kind of Healthy Streets and some of the things that were done last year, but maybe going through a different process and along a different track. So the 2021 program that I'm going to be discussing today is specifically focused on kind of two issue areas. The first is the reconfigurations on arterials, and then the second is the neighborhood slow streets. So we have three arterial programs. The first one I want to highlight is South Main Street from William to Stadium. Last year, you may recall, so Main Street is, as I'm sure all of you are aware, is 2 lanes in each direction. What we did last year is we took the outside lane and kind of turned it into a bike lane. And that was done with cones. And what we learned from that deployment is a couple things. First of all, there was a negative reaction to the materials we used. A lot of people complained that the cones and barricades really made it feel like a construction zone and led to some confusion and ambiguity. We've addressed that by, instead of using cones, we're going to put in-road delineators. So these are kind of those plastic bollards in the roadway, similar to what you might see on William Street, or those crosswalk signs. Actually, it's probably closer to the crosswalk signs that you see, what we call the R1-6 gateway treatments. Those are the materials that we're proposing to use throughout this project. The other thing you'll note on the design that you see in front of you is, instead of taking the outside lane, we're actually proposing a complete lane reconfiguration to a more traditional, what we would call road diet. So instead of 2 lanes in each direction, this will be 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane that you can see here in the middle. And then there's a buffered protected bike lane against the curb going in each direction. This was an important modification because that addition of that center turn lane, we think, will alleviate some of the congestion that was occurring. If you experienced Main Street last year, if there was a car turning, onto Hill or Hoover or Pauline, since there was no dedicated turn lane, that would back up traffic. And so the addition of a dedicated turn lane or center turn lane actually does help with safety, and it does help with mobility issues for all users. So this is kind of a big change from what we saw last year. I will note that this deployment is proposed to be temporary. So if this gets approved by council, it would run from roughly May to November. They would be pulled up in preparation for winter. But I will acknowledge too that if the program is very successful, if the road seems to be operating well, we would, evaluate it and contemplate it for future permanent installation. So, but right now it is being proposed just as a temporary pilot project. The next segment I want to highlight is North Packard between Hill and State. This is almost identical to last year's deployment, where what we did is we took away the turn lane in favor of restoring a bike lane. Some of the ancient history on this is that the bike lane was removed as part of a detour plan several years ago and was never reinstalled. This fills in a critical gap in the bike network. It's just really one block. It's about 400 feet long, but it's a kind of a crucial block. And so restoring that, I think, will serve a really key gap, or fill a key gap in the bike network. This is being proposed to be permanent, and we are actually getting quotes as well to resurface the bike lane. We know that the segment of Packard, the pavement condition is not in the best condition, but the road is not actually up for resurfacing. The entirety of the road is not for resurfacing for several years out. So we are planning on putting in resurfacing of just the bike lane as part of this project. So then that way the pavement markings stick, and that facility becomes more comfortable as well. The third arterial program is East Packard between Eisenhower and the eastern city limits. This represents a significant change to last year's deployment as well. Again, you may recall last year we took this 5-lane road, which is 2 lanes in each direction with a center turn lane. Last year we took away the outside lane, so we kind of turned it into a 3-lane roadway with a very wide bike lane. There was some negative reaction to that, and what we did is we went back to the drawing board and see how much room we had on the roadway, and we found out that if we narrowed the lanes to about 10 feet each, we could squeeze out enough room to put in a bike lane. Now, one thing I will note is this is a bike lane. This is not a protected or buffered bike lane like I showed you with the previous examples. So this isn't going to have, the high comfort facility that we've talked about in some of our past discussions. But portions of the section of East Packard do have a side path. And so for those that are, not as comfortable riding in a bike lane of that design, do have some other options as well. And this, again, is responsive to some of the concerns we heard about congestion, since this is one of the major kind of arterials into the community. Moving on to the neighborhood slow streets. This is a big long list, so I won't go over it in any detail, but I did want to let you know that last year's program included 26 locations. That has been increased to 34 locations. We added 8 additional locations based on some of the public engagement we conducted. There were some additional neighborhoods that came into the fray. For example, I know South Ravenna was one of the new additions based on community input. But then the other thing we did is there were some staff-driven examples as well, whereby last year one of the complaints or concerns of the program was that if a street got a neighborhood slow street treatment and the next street over, a parallel street, did not get it, there was kind of a spillover traffic effect. And so we went through and we looked at roadways, for example, that were immediately adjacent to another road in the program, and went ahead and included those as well. A good example is Rosewood. Jewett and other roads are in the same network, and so including Rosewood this time around is meant to be responsive to minimizing that spillover effect. To give you an idea of what the treatments would look like on the neighborhood slow streets, it would be very similar to last year. We would have a barricade that would discourage through traffic. It would alert motorists to the possible presence of bicyclists and pedestrians and encourage motorists to slow down. This will be the standard treatment at most of the endpoints, the bookends, but we also have a smaller design as well. One of the things that we heard last year was that these larger type 3 barricades became problematic at some intersections because of their size, and so we have a kind of backup option to use just 2 barrels instead. For example, at Chapin, just off of Huron, there was some concern that this type 3 barricade was way too big for the width of that road. So we'll make that modification to be responsive to that concern. The other addition that we included in the neighborhood slow streets is this last panel over here to the far right. We are now going to, or we're proposing to include cross streets as well, notification of the cross streets. So again, last year we did kind of the bookends, the endpoints, alerting motorists, but several streets have cross streets that enter in, and if you don't enter that street from, the arterial, you might not know that you're entering a slow street or a healthy street. So this proposal now includes treatments for those intersecting streets as well. One thing I didn't touch on, I meant to, there was a fairly robust engagement opportunity through the month of April, or I'm sorry, through the month of March to early April. We launched an online engagement tool. It was a suggestion tool where people could drop pins on a map, and then they could say whether or not they would support a healthy street in that location. We got 963 comments, 457 showed support, 393 voiced opposition to, and then 111 were other. So you'll see that there's a slight majority that were in support. I will also say that many of the comments that we received against, we have addressed a lot of the concerns that we've heard. You know, some of the changes that I just discussed are responsive to many of the concerns that we heard for those that were against the program, reflecting on what their experience was last year. So we are hopeful that this year's deployment will be more well received throughout the community as a whole. We've tried to be responsive to the things we've heard, and we are looking for Transportation Commission's recommendation tonight. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Before we go to questions, I'm just going to briefly report out from the Healthy Streets Committee, which has worked with staff over the last few months to help inform the deployment for this year. I'm on that committee, so I think we're just going to make it easy, and I will do the report out. The committee does recommend to Transportation Commission that we move this forward and recommend that council approves the expenditure for this year. In general, the committee, you know, we looked at a lot of the feedback and had an opportunity to provide feedback on the plans. And one thing we really saw was that, as Commissioner has mentioned, this year's plans are really responsive to the feedback from last year. And many of the most common complaints about the deployments last year, especially on arterials, have been addressed in the plans for this year. And so we felt pretty good that it would be a smoother rollout this year. Things like the way things were signed, the layouts of some of the streets, the configurations. So those were our conclusions. And I'm now happy to take questions or comments. I see Commissioner Boland and then Commissioner Dish.
Hi, thanks for this. I'm really excited about this rolling out early this year. One issue that was discussed at the Transportation Commission the last time we talked about healthy streets was the experience of driving on the road for those healthy streets that cover long stretches like Arbor View, which goes, I don't know, six or 8 blocks maybe. And that once you get past the barricade and you're on the road, it just feels like normal. And I wondered if you thought about a way to address that.
We don't have any proposal for, you know, like a traffic calming, for lack of a better term, treatment throughout the corridor. The only thing I can think of is we can maybe talk to the contractor about where the placement of the additional signage is for, for those cross streets, so that it might be a way to kind of reinforce this message even for people who are traversing, the length of the corridor instead of just kind of bisecting it. But I will admit there aren't necessarily any kind of interim treatments in between proposed as part of the project.
The feeder streets treatments are new this year, right? So in last year's, there were things at either end and then nothing else. But this year, if there are intersecting streets, there will be gateways at all of those.
Yeah. Correct. And then those will be visible, I suppose, as you're driving down the street. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Dish.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a clarification. Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Hess. And on the East Packard one, will the bike lane, there'll be one on either side going in each direction? Okay, good. Thanks.
Yes, correct.
Commissioner Parsons.
Thank you, Raymond. And I'm going to give an enthusiastic support for this program. And I want to thank the committee that worked on this, because I think it's fabulous, and I think it's really great steps forward from last year that I think personally was a big success, minus a couple hiccups, but overall I'm really enthused. So 2 quick questions, Raymond. We're essentially doing post and paint as opposed to construction barrels on a couple of these roads, and I'm curious about what the cost increase was that you guys ended up looking at, because I would love to see more of these post and paint where we can do them potentially in the future. And then a similar, very excited about Packard. I noticed that center lane goes down to 9.5 feet. Are there concerns with that? That's starting to push some limits of maybe not necessarily best practice, but 10 foot is always what I've heard. So I'm just curious to hear, is it possible to make that permanent on Packard, or is 9.5 sort of pushing it, and it's a sort of COVID healthy streets experiment that we're looking at?
Yeah, so to your first question about cost, I will note that the invitation to bid, which is our bid process, is currently out on the streets right now. It is due on Thursday. So I don't have a firm cost proposal for you. There is an engineering estimate that the engineering firm that worked on this for us put together. What we anticipate is that the totality of the project is probably going to be somewhere in the $400,000 range, which is not inexpensive, I will acknowledge. I think one of the things that at least I can say with a straight face is some of these deployments are proposed to be permanent. So when we look at the 2 Packard deployments, this isn't, $400,000 for a temporary deployment. I will say it's hard to do an apples to apples comparison of paint and post to what we did last year because, for example, Main Street is so very different. If we were to look at Main Street, how much we spent on, the cones and barrels and barricades, we're doing a complete restriping with the in-road delineators. That project, to be quite honest with you, is a little bit on the higher side because some of those materials are so specific to what it is we're trying to do. It'd be hard for me to make that comparison. I'm sure if we sat down and really crunched the numbers, we could try to find some sort of comparison. But right off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to do that. And then can you remind me what your second question was?
Yeah, just that the Packard center lane gets a little narrow at 9.5, and is that okay to pursue permanently? Because I love the configuration and I'm really excited about it. Is this really temporary, or are we within parameters?
Yeah, no, and thank you for reminding. I did not mention that the East Packard deployment is also being proposed as a permanent installation. The 9.5 is acceptable. It is a similar configuration of what we did on Plymouth just recently, where we, squinched down the lanes and we're able to put in bike lanes on each side of the road. Again, I'm not a traffic engineer or a transportation engineer, so I probably shouldn't speak out of turn, but my understanding is that 9.5 foot lane for a center turn lane is acceptable. I know you're right, we tend to use 10-foot travel lanes, but the center turn lane, since it's kind of a it's used by vehicles, but it also doesn't always have friction, between kind of the vehicles. There's only intermittently when vehicles are present. But yeah, 9.5 is acceptable for the way we're putting it in on this roadway.
Commissioner Clark.
I apologize if I might have missed this, but I'm just curious what the status of the Broadway Bridge lanes were this year and if that's going to happen again.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I didn't go over that. And so some of the deployments that I didn't mention, I hinted at, but for example, Division. Division is not included in this year's program because the DDA is pursuing that through their People Friendly Streets initiative. Similarly, the Catherine Miller, which was the east-west on the north side, is also being handled by the DDA through their People Friendly Streets initiative. And then lastly, State Street as well. One of the things that we shied away from Broadway for a couple of reasons. First of all, on the Division bike lane, the current thinking is that would run from Packard to Catherine. And the reason why it would stop at Catherine is Division changes in terms of its width north of Catherine. It goes from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. And in order to put in a dedicated bike facility north of Catherine, we'd have to take away one of the vehicular travel lanes. And doing so I think we need to think through what some of those ramifications are and what some of those trade-offs are, both in response to, emergency vehicle response times as well as motor vehicle congestion, things like that. That's not to say it's off the table. The point is just simply that as part of this program, we didn't redeploy or look at redeploying Division and the Broadway Bridge. Another reason why we didn't do the Broadway Bridge this year was because Broadway bridges and several other bridges throughout town are undergoing maintenance. And another lesson we learned last year was that there were unintended impacts from other construction projects. Broadway Bridge in particular suffered from the closure of Depot, which you wouldn't think Depot would cause that much congestion on Broadway Bridge, but because of all that hospital traffic that would typically come in on Depot, it diverted over to the Broadway Bridge and added to a lot of congestion. And so since there's work being done on the Broadway Bridge and because it wasn't connecting to an existing facility as part of the DDA's Division project, we did not pursue Division or even the Swift Pontiac corner up there as well. So good question. We're not pursuing it this year, but that's not to say it can't be pursued in the future.
Commissioner Clark.
Okay, if I got a quick follow-up, sorry. We used that Broadway and Division 1 last year all the time because it's pretty much the only way that connected the north side into town. And so without that connector, we're kind of on a little island over there. And it makes the rest of the healthy streets less useful. And I was just wondering if the alternative kind of connectors have been considered and if there's any data to kind of back up the traffic delays and how prolonged they might have been or what times they were caused. And just if we have anything, I don't know if the lower town mobility study is done or not, or yeah.
Yeah, again, great questions. There is a very extensive report that we produce, our staff as well as the DDA staff put together. It is available on the Healthy Streets website, so if you ever really want to go into it, but it does talk about some of that vehicular delay. One of the things I will note is we weren't able to fully evaluate the Broadway Bridge project or even the East Packard project and parts of South Main because those were City Council decided to pull those back earlier from the full deployment, which is fine, but it kind of truncated some of our data collection and observation opportunities. So we don't have a very, the data we collected on Division and some of the others that stayed in place is a little bit more robust, and some of the others we had to kind of scramble and try to collect as much data in the time frame that we were able to. But I do hear you. I know that all of our bridges and our waterways present kind of this bottleneck, and especially if you're, if you're on a bicycle or walking, it presents a challenge. And it was just one of those things we weren't able to make that connection as part of this program this year.
Other questions or comments? I don't think I'm seeing any. So am I correct that we don't have a contractor yet? So
that is correct. Come
which,
Thursday, we'll know if we have a responsive bidder.
okay, I'm just thinking about the language of this motion here. It's going to be a little bit of a fill in the blank motion because we don't have the contractor or the final amounts. Kayla, should we sort of move forward with what we have, or is there a way we should revise this to, it will adjust when we need it to?
I guess the only adjustment that you might want to consider is that if you wanted to say something like conditional on receiving a responsive bidder and a cost estimate that is reasonable and reasonable is not going to be well defined, but reasonable in comparison to the engineering estimate provided.
Okay.
And allow staff the ability to interpret what is reasonable.
Okay. You know what I'm going to do is we're going to call it the necessary funds rather than call out the exact amounts. Will that work?
Sure. Yeah.
Great. Cool. So I am going to read this motion. The Transportation Commission recommends that City Council approve the resolution to award the contract to the appropriate bidder for the 2021 Healthy Streets deployment and to appropriate necessary funds from the Major Street Fund operations and City of Ann Arbor maintenance budgets, and City of Ann Arbor maintenance budget, and from the Minor Street Fund operations and maintenance budget. I'm looking for someone to move this. I see Commissioner Hadamaki in the second. Commissioner Boland. Okay, and we are just going to go straight into a vote. Do we need this? We need this to be a roll call vote?
It's not required to be a roll call, just if you preferred that, I'm happy to do so. Otherwise.
It's probably easier because there's so many faces on here. Let's do a roll call.
Sure. So I will call commissioners to vote on the motion that Molly has that Commissioner Kleinman has just read. And please vote yes, no, or indicate if you are abstaining. Commissioner Boland.
Yes.
Councilmember Briggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Felt.
That was a yes.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I couldn't see it. Commissioner Hadamaki.
Yes.
Commissioner Hull.
Yes.
Commissioner Kleinman.
Yes, but I think you missed one.
Oh, did I?
You're good. Sorry. Yes.
Sorry. Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Parsons.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
And it carries unanimously.
Great. Thank you. So now I think I hand the reins back over to Chair Mills.
8B, yes, this is the reconsideration of amendments to modify home occupation regulations in section 5.16.6.h of chapter 55 Unified Development Code for City Council approval. Mr. Leonard will give us a brief background and then I'll read the motion. There's no public hearing.
Correct. Planning Commission, based on Planning Commission feedback, Commissioner Mills and I have placed this item on the agenda. This would be the last opportunity if the Planning Commission desires to reconsider their recommendation on proposed modifications to the home occupation regulations. If passed, I would recommend, if the motion to reconsider is passed, I would then recommend the subsequent motion, which would postpone reconsideration and action on, or postpone action on that item until the May 4th meeting. In between now and then, we would also bring this back to the Ordinance Revisions Committee for a series of options and ultimately revised ordinance to present on May 4th.
All right. So the first motion that we have to discuss is just whether or not to reconsider it. So that motion is the Planning Commission shall reconsider the approval of amendments to modify home occupation regulations in section 5.16.6.h of chapter 55 Unified Development Code originally approved on April 6th, 2021. Moved by, it has to be somebody who was there, Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Dish. Is there any discussion of this motion? We don't do this very often, so I just want to clarify that this is effectively like, we take back the fact that we passed it. We don't want to send it to council yet. And that if there are changes that we want to make to it, that would be in the second, we can discuss that after this. Commissioner Lee.
I'll keep it really brief. I think we heard from the public pretty loud and I think we need to revisit this. So I would be in favor of postponing it, having a good discussion about it. I'm not afraid to say, hey, I think we need to revisit it, and I think we made a mistake in passing it, and we want to listen to the public. So I'm in favor of this. I have no problems with it, so I'm going to vote in favor.
Any other discussion of pulling it back? Commissioner Milstein.
I'm also hoping that Ryan Stanton or somebody from the Ann Arbor News is currently watching this so that they could publicize this a little bit more in case there was anything else we overlooked that we didn't think about, any other home professions that maybe those people can come out or Zoom into our next meeting so that we can get some additional feedback if there are other professions that we may have overlooked or other businesses that we may have overlooked. Thank you.
Agreed, and I just point out that we did have some additional communications that extend beyond metalworking to recording studios. And I also think, well, let's get to this in the second motion about postponement. Because I have a question about that. Anything else about whether or not we pull it back? Any other discussion? Okay. I think we can just do a voice vote. All in favor of the motion to reconsider, please say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. I think that's all the planning commissioners. Is anybody opposed? Great. Okay, so that motion carries. So let me read the second motion. The City Planning Commission shall postpone consideration of amendments to modify home occupation regulations in section 5.16.6.h of Chapter 55 Unified Development Code to the May 4th, 2021 regular meeting, moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandel. Is there discussion of this? And the things that I think would be helpful to discuss are, when we come back to that, there were a couple different kinds of motions on the table before, or suggestions on the table. One is just moving some occupations from prohibited to permissive. But I think that there was also some public comment about whether we should get rid of distinguishing between professions at all, and instead focus on the outcomes, the effects, the noise, and the trip generation and that kind of thing. So knowing what to have staff prepare for that, I think would be helpful to get people's thoughts about where your mind is about which of those two paths we ought to take. Commissioner Abrams, and then Commissioner Milstein, and then.
Well, I think Commissioner Milstein was ahead of me in line.
Okay. But Mr. Leonard is pulling me back because maybe I'm off.
Okay.
My intention was to provide both of those as options to the ORC, and then hopefully the Ordinance Revisions Committee meeting could help advise staff on which to forward to the full Planning Commission. But my intention was to provide sort of both options: one, moving activities; another option that would just strike all listing of specific uses. So.
Going into the ORC, I would also like to know because the ORC, for those who don't know, that's the Ordinance Revisions Committee. That's a subcommittee of Planning Commission. Commissioner Milstein was first, and then Commissioner Abrams.
Thank you. I'd like to, the item I'd like to discuss is timing. So if the ORC is going to be looking at this next Tuesday, then a week from then it would come to the Planning Commission. I don't know if that's enough time for members of the public to review this and for us to get enough feedback, just because that's really only a week. And based on how much feedback we received, I think there's going to be enough people who are interested in it. So I'm not going to move this right now, but I'd really like to have some conversation about potentially moving this instead of having discussion at the May 4th meeting, even though we may be prepared to have the discussion, to potentially moving it to the May 18th meeting, just so that members of the public have enough time to review this, provide us with feedback, so it doesn't seem as rushed that we're just going from week to week to week to try to make this decision. So I'd like to get my colleagues' opinions on that.
Also, Mr. Leonard letting us know what's on May 18th. If that's looking crazy busy. Commissioner Abrams, do you want to chime in?
I was going to express some thoughts about the difference between the two standards, but I think if Mr. Leonard's planning to present both, then I'll just withhold that.
And you're on ORC.
Yeah, exactly.
So you'll get to discuss it next week. Commissioner Sauvé.
I'll add actually one more comparison that might extend the timeline is I think there was also some confusion between like hobbyist and occupation. And I think kind of the next tier is live work, which also overlapped, I think, a bit with, TC1 transit corridor kind of zoning as well. So even if staff could just share what live work zoning looks like compared to home occupation, if there is a difference and kind of what those kind of definitions and land use standards might look like, I think would be helpful for us understanding if that's a completely separate zoning designation and where that Venn diagram of overlap might look like. So with that, if there's like a third tier of comparison in time, that's where I would agree that we start getting really pinched when evaluating the variations of this thing.
To the first question, to Commissioner Sauvé, yeah, we can provide that detail. We don't really have a separate live work definition in our code. We have business uses, we have residential uses. This is intended to be an occupation. I think that is distinct from hobby. However, I understand people's concern. I can do my best to interpret it, but as I cautioned the Planning Commission before, frankly, zoning is a terrible place to try to define every scenario. And I don't yet know what is on May 18th. That deadline has not yet passed, but knowing that this was going to be placed on there, I could make sure that we are scheduling around it. And any projects that come after, we can, I can make sure that agenda doesn't get too large.
Sounds good. Commissioner Milstein.
I'd like to make that a friendly amendment, moving it to May 18th.
That was, yes, whoever's moved and seconded.
I'll second that.
It was Sauvé and Gibrandel were the move and seconded.
And they're cool with it. So that's actually the motion. We don't even need to make an actual amendment or vote on the amendment. That's what the motion reads now. Any other discussion of that? So the plan of attack, just for people that are listening then, would be that we discuss this at ORC, which is in 1 week's time on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And then there would be a 3-week gap and it would come back for a vote before the full Planning Commission on May 18th. All right. All those in favor of the motion to postpone, please say yes or raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, then the motion carries unanimously. Item 8C is giving some work plan overviews, because I think that there are actually quite a few places where our work plans overlap. And so staff was going to share just a couple of highlights from Planning Commission and Transportation Commission's work plans.
Sure, I'll start. I've got a brief 45-minute presentation. So the Planning Commission work plan is generally broken up into a couple of categories: the master plan work, the ordinance work, and then different categories of wish lists. From a master plan side, on a regular basis, the Planning Commission is the body that takes final action on the capital improvements plan. That, of course, has a lot of the city's priorities for transportation, capital investments, and a wide variety of capital investments across the city. The master plan, last night, the city administrator did recommend, as part of his budget presentation, funding for the city to undertake a comprehensive master plan update in 2022. Starting in 2022. That's great. We'll see, obviously, a lot of budget process to go to carry forward. Also in the administrator's recommendation was some support for conducting a community conversation about our single-family zoning districts and the history of race in single-family zoning and the opportunities for changing how we think about single-family zoning in our community. That conversation is starting to happen in our community. I think it's time that the city planning, from a planning perspective, starts engaging in that long before we start moving towards any policy prioritization along any of those lines. Then on the ordinance side, we have, this explains why the Planning Commission always looks so weary. They have recently completed updates to the sign ordinance, adding requirements for electrical vehicle parking, exemptions to solar, to our height limits when you're adding solar to roofs, exemptions to site plan requirements when you're adding solar accessory structures, some minor cleanup amendments to our code, a new floodplain overlay district, and then in process is changes to our outdoor lighting requirements, the modifications to our planned project modification requirements, which provide some flexibility of development standards, changes to site plan review thresholds that might make small and modest projects easier or less expensive or quicker to go through the review process. Our Planning Commission recently, as referenced before, recommended the establishment of a new transit corridor zoning district and some preliminary recommendations on where the city should start taking actions to rezone property, and amendments to our accessory dwelling unit ordinance to perhaps further increase the opportunity for the realization of accessory dwelling units in our community. Fortunately for them, unfortunately sometimes for me, every Planning Commission agenda ends with commissioner proposed business. And here are some of the more transportation focused ideas that have come out of the commission over the last year or so. Looking certainly, and I should say on the horizon is looking at our parking ordinance requirements, potentially removing parking minimums and looking at other ways such as tandem parking provisions that we can be more flexible in our parking requirements. Making sure that when developments happen, whether they're public or private roads, that we're getting sidewalks on both sides of the roads. We've seen some developments that only include one or the other, making sure that that's required. A relatively recent experience, although for several years now, is ride share and delivery accommodation on sites. It tends to be a more acute concern in the downtown districts where land is more tight. So how do we want to think about accommodating that as part of our transportation plans? Ride share is part of the transportation plan that you just accommodated or recommended for approval. Looking at bicycle parking requirements, I think generally there is whether or not we should perhaps simplify or change the priority of the types of bike parking that we require versus interior versus covered versus Class C, which is just simple hoops. Pedestrian connectivity, how can we encourage more pedestrian connectivity between and among private developments when we don't necessarily control that adjacent land? And more, a hot topic is drive-throughs and whether or not our community should allow them at all. Kayla?
We got a lot. If there's anything that you all want to like chime in on and give us a draft to respond to, we can get more done ahead of I mean, honestly, that's how the EV parking happened. So I think, yeah. Kayla, can you give Ms. Coleman, can you give a overview of the Transportation Commission's work plan?
Yes, and I'm going to make it very short and sweet. So you saw in the agenda packet the Transportation Commission work plan for this year, and we always keep ours, call it a draft work plan, because it continues to evolve throughout the year. We do target our topics for particular months and flesh it out in that detail, but it's always a moving target that's subject to change. But as you can see in that work plan, there are some items that we revisit on a routine basis, some annual topics. And one that is a particular intersection with the Planning Commission is the Capital Improvements Plan. And the Transportation Commission has been making recommendations for the CIP over the last few years. And I think that that's been a good opportunity for some collaboration. Although we haven't come together in a meeting like this before, we have been exchanging materials in a way that's been collaborative. We've also received presentations about the transit-oriented zoning, and Alexis DeLeo has attended multiple Transportation Commission Transportation Commission meetings to present about that effort, and commissioners have provided input in that process. Also, parking, as Brett mentioned, parking has also been a topic of discussion with the Transportation Commission, and there's been an interest in what the DDA is looking at with curb space management downtown, in particular locations for accessible parking. So that's a topic that we've not delved into deeply at this point, but has been noted as a potential topic of interest for the commission. We also, on an annual basis, we just had our meeting just before this, was to receive the presentation of the this fiscal year's budget, an overview of the budget as a whole, but primarily the transportation elements. And the commission typically has historically made a recommendation to city council related to those transportation components of the budget. We also receive an annual presentation about street resurfacing projects. So the city's engineering department has a annual street resurfacing plan, and that's one of the primary ways that I think that the Transportation Commission has influenced changes to the streetscapes throughout the city that have been implemented. Questions get raised and follow-up is done, and I have truly seen the impact even in just this year's presentation. A few roads in particular, such as South Industrial, there were commissioner questions and feedback that resulted in changes to those plans. Let's see, other highlights that I might mention. Another work area that the Transportation Commission has been working on and is maybe close to wrapping up is changes to the creating, I guess, an ordinance called a micromobility ordinance, or personal mobility vehicle, maybe the exact term, but it will provide policy guidance for the appropriate operations and space for things like personal mobility vehicles, such as e-scooters. And that's been an effort that the Transportation Commission has stuck through working on the last couple of years. And we're getting very close there to bringing that to final action. Let's see, that does not by any means encompass all of the work of the Transportation Commission. We often get various things that are brought to the Transportation Commission referred from City Council, particular topics that have a transportation emphasis or focus where the Transportation Commission is asked to weigh in. And the range of topics have been brought to the commission. But in the interest of time, I'll leave it at that as the quick overview. If Raymond or others want to chime in on things that I missed that we should note here in this meeting, please do. But I think that there are definitely opportunities of intersection between planning and transportation. And I think this was a good opportunity to see how we can be working together, and look forward to future opportunities for that as well.
Thank you. Very good. All right, let's move on to item number 9, public comment. This is the final opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about any item of interest. Public comment can be made by calling 877-853-5247 and then entering meeting ID 990-9896-8122. City staff will select callers that have digitally raised their hand. You do that by pressing *9 on your phone. And since I see some folks that have already raised their hand, we can promote one of them in turn.
Caller with phone number ending with 760. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the commissions.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Good evening. I'm Francis Mills at 5 Parkview Place, Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was unfortunately a little too busy with childcare duties during agenda item 6. I hope there would be an opportunity for public comment tonight during 8B, the Planning Commission's reconsideration of the home occupation ordinance. However, since there wasn't, I'd like to use this opportunity to just let the record reflect. And I suppose also let the Transportation Commission and Councilmember Briggs know, and also I guess the public here again, that there was an unprecedented 20 callers that spoke during last week's special meeting of the Planning Commission, specifically asking for striking item 4H, machine shops and metalworking, from the list of prohibited occupations. I don't believe the city's posted a recording of those comments yet that we've been able to find, so I guess it's important that those stories be acknowledged and reaffirmed. Second, maybe is a question for Mr. Leonard. I'm curious to know, will the ORC meeting next week be entertaining public comment? And third, I guess, is that my rudimentary understanding of zoning law in Michigan is that an activity should be enumerated specifically for it to be allowed. Therefore, I'd like to suggest the staff also consider, when preparing language for ORC, the possibility of adding home machine shops as an explicitly allowed activity. Otherwise, just want to thank you for having the courage and patience to reconsider the home occupations ordinance. We appreciate all that you do to volunteer for our city, and thank you for helping ensure that Ann Arbor treats metal workers like it treats woodworkers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 955. Caller with the phone number ending with 955. Go ahead.
Hi, Kirk Westfall again, still at 3505 Charter Place. Thanks for a great meeting. I really appreciated the modification that, in my view, would untie the city's hands when it comes to evaluating and implementing lane reductions. In my previous comment, I sort of forgot the punchline to the whole road diet conversation, and that's there's been I think the Federal Highway Administration estimates a 19 to 47% reduction in overall crashes, whether it's vehicle on vehicle or vehicle and pedestrian, when there's a road diet implemented. So this is a very implementable and urgently needed technique that I think we should be pushing a lot more aggressively on. I'm really pleased to see the Healthy Streets implementation on South Main that will be a temporary road diet. I was questioning why Packard wouldn't also get that treatment, since their traffic volume, at least for part of that segment, is less, slightly less than South Main. This is such a threat to crossing pedestrians when they go across 4 to 5 lane roads that I think it should be looked at very aggressively and err on the side of causing a little bit of vehicle congestion. My other point has to do with roundabouts. The Federal Highway Administration has said that most intersections should be evaluated for roundabouts. I wish this were just the default condition by which we reconstruct roads and corridors, is that unless otherwise indicated, there should be a roundabout at intersections, whether it's signaled or stop signs. I think the Highway Insurance Institute said there's about a 70% reduction in injury crashes when there's conversion to a roundabout. So I think this should be really an urgent priority, just a general lens through which we look at all infrastructure changes. And I think it should have been much more prominently featured in the plan. However, your hands aren't tied with regard to how aggressively you implement that.
30 more seconds.
I would advocate for a really strong look at both road diets and roundabouts for safety of all road users. Thanks so much again.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to join the queue for this final opportunity for public comment, you can press *9 to raise your hand digitally.
Caller with the phone number ending with 581. Caller with the phone number ending with 581. You can use *6 to unmute your phone and address the commissions.
Hello, my name is John Churchville. I live at 2015 Crestland Drive in Ann Arbor. Thank you for the opportunity for public comment. I was waiting since the beginning of this meeting. I have admiration for all of you guys and what you do and the work that you're doing and doing this over Zoom. I'm a musician. I have been working out of my home for the last year. I've gone from, in 1 year, from 50 plus gigs a year down to 1 in the last year. And I work in my home studio, and it is, I would consider a recording studio. I am a music teacher as well for the last decade, and I've been teaching students for that decade to set up and use recording studios in their home. I have students who have music on Spotify who have won national awards creating music with their laptops and home studios. So I would very much urge the committee to, I loved what was mentioned tonight about, getting rid of the specific prohibited uses. I think that would be a very, have a positive effect on just people questioning what they're doing in their homes with recording. And I'll just make one more point that so far this year I have booked shows with the Ark, with the River Folk Festival, with Gopherwood Concert Series. All of these shows are required for me to be run out of my basement, out of my home studio, and so we're actually helping venues as musicians, helping venues to continue their business and to continue to stay connected and continue to have musicians stay creative through the use of recording studios. And so having this on a prohibited ordinance list, there's just too much gray area these days, especially when somebody can record a Grammy Award winning album using their phone at home. So I think it's an outdated language that should be removed. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending with 447. Caller with the phone number ending with 447. You can unmute your phone and address the commission. Press it. Go ahead.
Good evening. Mark Bradshaw. I live on Easy Street. I have several comments. I think the first two I'd like to address to the traffic commissions. About the Packard Street lane reductions. I live right off of Packard, and it's my observation that there are very large easements on either side of Packard. I just would like to ask the question if bike lanes and the easements out of the traffic lanes has ever been considered for Packard. There's on the south side of Packard is a paved trail that needs to be repaved that would make an excellent bike lane. It's already there. And bicycles also use the sidewalks on the north side of Packard pretty regularly. So the bike lanes are already there. They would just need to be widened to allow for pedestrian safety. That would be an easy option without reducing the traffic flow on Packard, which is a major artery in and out of the city and has significant traffic backups in the mornings and the evenings for your consideration. Also, as part of the A20 for traffic flow, has anyone ever considered synchronizing the lights in this town? It would go a long way in simplifying traffic flow and also reducing emissions because the cars would not have to accelerate back up to speed as often. They could maintain a steady speed, which reduces emissions. And also on the home occupations, I am semi-retired, have a home business, home occupation. The short version, I make things and I fix things. I do research, design and build research apparatus, and I also I've done work for the Hands-On Museum, repair machines for people, that sort of thing. And I am not I don't have a machine shop, and my priority is not metalworking, but I do use those tools and skills in my job, and having those restricted.
30 more seconds.
That would interfere with my ability to make a living. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. If anyone else wishes to provide a public comment, you can press *9 on your phone to indicate that. Going once, going twice. Okay, I will Entertain a motion for adjournment, moved by Commissioner Milstein, seconded by Commissioner Gibb Randall. We will do this together. All in favor can raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. It was lovely meeting with you folks.
Thanks,